Okay, we're live. How you doing, everybody? And welcome to the John Riley Project. And I've told you before on some of these other podcasts we've been doing in the month of October. It's a great time in October. It's political season, right? We have all of our local political candidates are out on the campaign trail. They're in the hot and heavy section of their campaigns, and we've had wonderful opportunities to speak with so many candidates for Poway School Board, for Poway City Council, and for Poway Mayor. And today we have a candidate is joining me here in the live stream podcast. He's running for mayor, and this gentleman's name is Yuri Bohlen. Yuri, how are you?
Good, John. Thank you for having me. It's been a long time, 4 years. In fact, I was episode 9.
Yeah, you were
in 2018. Yeah. I'm not sure. I'm guessing like 290 something today.
292.
Oh, I was close.
Yeah, pull the mic a little closer to you, and we're
Sure.
going to kind of
I was
settle
guessing
in.
292 or 290, so not bad.
Yeah.
If it was The Price is Right, I'd be on stage.
There you go. So yeah, you were episode 9, and that's when you were running in 2018.
Yeah.
So we're gonna talk about a lot of stuff. We're gonna talk about your campaign. We're gonna talk about the issues that are hot in Poway. We're gonna talk about your platform. We're going to talk a little bit about your backstory, and I want to just tell the audience, for those of you that are watching the live stream, you can participate. So if you're on Facebook or on YouTube and you're watching the live stream, you can ask questions or make comments that Yuri or I or whomever, we can take your questions and comments. We'll see them on the screen. We'll show them there for everyone to witness, and then we'll make this an interactive kind of a community forum, yes. Right? It makes it kind of fun.
Yeah.
So, okay, so let's get started.
All right.
So let's, what I usually do with my candidate interviews is I usually ask, what's your, a little bit about your backstory, but you've been on the podcast before, but still a lot of people maybe didn't see episode 9. So
that is true.
So let's start from the beginning. So tell me a little bit about where you grew up and kind of your backstory all the way up to the time that you came to Poway.
Sure. I was born in Coronado. I lived there basically the first 10 years of my life. And then my parents and I moved to Geneva, Switzerland.
Geneva, really?
Yes. My mother was French and my father American in the Navy. And we decided let's go to Switzerland and live. We lived there for about 1.5 years, and then we came back to Coronado, stayed there for about a year, and then moved to University City, about 2 blocks away from UTC, and grew up there as a teenager, graduated UC High, class of 90. Then we moved to Carmel Mountain in 91, lived there basically until I got married, and me and my wife wanted to live in something other than San Diego. So I bought a home here in Poway, and we've been here ever since, 10.5 years, and I love it. And that's why I'm running again, because I want to keep it the city and the country. That's the reason why I moved here in the first place, because the schools are good. Not that I have any children. My wife has children from previous marriage, and they are, of course, all grown up now. But when they did go to school, they went to PUSD schools, and this is just a good place to live, period. And over the years, certain things have been happening. What inspired me first to run in 2018 was the loss of the community church thrift shops and the Carriage Center. If the thrift shops were here today, you wouldn't know me from Adam.
Right.
You wouldn't know me from Adam. That's what inspired me in the first place, was the community church thrift shops. I had gone there since 1991 with my parents when I was a teenager. Then after my father died, I'd go there with my mother. Then I got married. I go there with my wife. I mean, it's tradition. It's generational. And that's why I'm here in the first place, to relive the reason why we all live here. I mean, that's a quote from Mickey Cafagna that I used at the GVCA forum. Mm-hmm. When do we stop destroying the reason why we live here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember in the 2018 campaign, that was before Poway Road was turned upside down. And you were very adamant about preserving the thrift stores. I remember that. And that was a big part of your campaign back then. And you even wanted to preserve a lot of other elements of Poway, you
Yes.
know, like the old community center and
Yes.
the Poway Bowl. And you talked a lot about that then.
Well, speaking of the Poway Bowl, because it's been brought up at a council meeting by one of the other candidates, and a lot of people don't know this, but I used to do stand-up comedy. And not only did I do stand-up comedy, I did stand-up comedy here in Poway. I hosted 2 shows. Foul Play Sports Bar doesn't exist anymore. It's a different establishment now behind the Arco on Carriage.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, Jimmy Z's at Poway Fun Bowl. I know the owner. He's a very nice man. I totally get it. But from the horse's mouth himself, he told me in 2018 when I was running, Yuri, I love you. You're great, but it's okay. Nobody's forcing me to do anything that I don't want to. And I was taken aback a little bit and said, I'm waiting for the right price at the right time. And I said to him, I respect your decision. No problem. And then I never talked about the bowling alley ever again. And then over the course of that campaign, certain things I didn't know at the time, I know now. In fact, in February 2nd, 2021, as a matter of fact, I spoke at a council meeting. It was Zoom at the time. And council member Caylin Frank amended the PRSP to allow the community church thrift shops at that time to be coming back should they choose. Now,
so the PRSP is a Poway Road specific plan. Right.
Now, it cannot be changed, but obviously it can be amended. And Ms. Frank amended it to allow, when the new one comes up, the community church thrift shops could come back should they choose. Now, I'm a realist. I realize that not all of the church thrift shops are going to come back. And in all sincerity, maybe none of them, because clearly the rent is going to be 3 or 4 times higher than it was at the Carrot Center. Not just in terms of a new building and all that, but look at this, the inflation that we're living in today, the worst since the late 70s.
Yeah, it's crazy.
You and I were both young kids then.
Yeah.
But we remember, we heard our parents talking, you know, and a lot of people don't realize this, but some of the things that many people are complaining about in Poway are technically not Mayor Voss's fault, nor the council. It's individual property rights. And I learned that the hard way. And I'll tell you how. That evening when it was amended, and I thanked Caylin Frank, and that's when I decided she is my representative in District 4, and I thanked her greatly. I was chastised a little bit by Councilmember Leonard, where he said something to the effect, if you want to be the mayor, you have to know these things. And he talked about, it was a property right owner who had failing health that wanted to leave. Now, some people might have said, oh my God, he talked to me so horribly, but I took it as a teachable moment. And then after that day, February 2nd, 2021, I took the time and the effort to read every agenda item word for word. And there's been a few that were like 100 something pages.
Yeah, you're right.
And I've read them all. And I'll be honest, some of them, I'm not sure exactly which way to turn on the issue. And when that's the case, I shut up and I sit in the back and just let the council meeting go. But when I do read something that I am familiar with and I want to speak on whatever side of the issue, then I'll go up on there and I'll say my piece. And I believe that even the council members have kind of found out that I actually know what I'm talking about on many issues. And I've even gotten some compliments and respect. And for that, I often get chastised by some of the, let's just say the malcontents of Poway. I sometimes refer to them as the Kool-Aid gang.
Well, you know, it's interesting because you were a candidate in 2018. And when you're a candidate for the first time, I mean, you go in
wet behind the ears.
Yeah, you are. You're a little wet behind the ears, but you go in with all the enthusiasm. There are big problems you want to solve, but there is a lot of detail that is part of the bureaucratic grind of the way the city works. And it's hard to get up to speed. And frankly, those 5 elected councilmen and mayor, they have the advantage of having all of that knowledge, all of those relationships with the key management in the city hall. But good on you for stepping up and really doing your due diligence and your homework, it makes you a better candidate now in 2022.
Yeah. 4 years ago, I was a political neophyte.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought, oh,
Yeah.
I watch C-SPAN. I know what's going on. No, I learned the hard way, but the smart way. You have to get knocked down. You have to be told, hey, you don't know what you're talking about. And that's when you go, okay, I'm going to do a teachable moment here, and I'm going to study, and I'm going to learn, and I'm going to know what I'm talking about in the future.
Well, give me an example of maybe a topic that, due to your research, you feel a lot better informed about, and it's a key part of your campaign today.
Okay, let's pick a good one. The Outpost.
Okay.
4 years ago, even before the election, it was already, quote unquote, a done deal. The election didn't matter who was mayor. It was already signed, sealed, and delivered. It's a private property.
It is.
And the original owners, Capexco, I had vetted them myself, maybe better than some. And at the time, I don't even know if they still exist because I haven't looked them up in 4 years. At the time, their resume included a parking lot. And that's all. Now I don't know. Maybe they're a good company now. I'm not sure. I don't even know if they still exist. They're a Canadian-based company that had a subsidiary in Los Angeles, but I couldn't tell you if they exist today. This council and this mayor, Mayor Voss, took a lot of the criticism. Now, the only thing I will say, as far as maybe a mistake by the council or a mistake by Mayor Voss, is they should have vetted Capexco better. They should have gone through a fine-tooth comb and say, hey, they only have experience with maybe one little project. Maybe we should look at somebody else. The other issue that I think was a mistake was no deals or contract negotiations should take place outside of not only the city of Poway, but in my opinion, City Hall itself. From what I understand, the rumors or the facts, depending on who you talk to, it was a done deal in Las Vegas. Now, we've all heard the saying, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Yeah.
But that's not actually true.
Yeah.
Some things get leaked.
Right.
But the Outpost is a private property deal, just like the bowling alley. And even though people were upset, and with the Outpost, everybody has a right to be upset. It is an eyesore on Poway Road, but it is a private property. And the current ownership group, I'm not even sure they're inclined to build. I think they're trying to flip it. So 6 months from now, a year from now, we might still be talking about this like it was 2 minutes ago. But in the meantime, I can just tell you, if I'm fortunate enough to be elected mayor, I'm going to take a more proactive approach with whoever the ownership group is. And I can't technically force them to do anything. But sometimes when you offer advice and maybe you have a little clout, maybe things move a little faster. Now, I know, let's say tomorrow, everybody's ready to do something with the Outpost. It's still going to take probably close to a year with all the permits and zoning codes that need to be redone. And even before that, a company has to come to city council one day and say, we'd like to do it this way. And then Mayor Voss and the 4 council members will see if it appeals to them, and they might offer recommendations or concessions one way or the other. And then it might be approved. And then you're going to have to look at basically about a year or so with permits and zoning laws and everything.
Right.
So my prediction is it could be January 1st, 2024 before the golden shovels come back.
The golden shovels
and
the hard hats.
And the hard hats. And we don't even know if January 1st, 2024 is even accessible.
Yeah, because they've got to sort it out. You know, like you said, the company went bankrupt again. I don't know the detail, but someone's got to step up to the plate, take ownership, decide they're going to want to make the project and complete it. But one of the things that I learned is that, you know, obviously the problem they had is when they dug the 2 stories down for the parking garage, which sounded like a cool idea in the beginning, but there was the creek bed there and they hit the water table and they were dealing with the flood, and that probably set them way off schedule and probably started the cycle of them going through their financial struggles. But They didn't do an EIR, did they? Did they properly vet that?
Well, I had asked that question multiple times at council meetings, and I did get an email from, I believe, I don't know if it was from an actual council member or a staff member, but they had labeled the environmental impact report for the Outpost as the whole Poway Road specific plan. And in all sincerity, the EIR for the PRSP is basically the thrift shops and the bowling alley from Fairfield. But I guess, legally speaking, they included it all the way down Poway Road to include the Outpost. Now, I don't know if that was a mistake. Could be. But one thing about the Outpost, and we talked about it 4 years ago, was I was against the underground parking to begin with. I even mentioned that at the GVCA forum at Painted Rock Elementary 4 years ago. My biggest fear, let's just say everything was good and there's an underground parking. My biggest fear is we live in California. Earthquakes are pretty common here, from what I hear.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too.
I always sincerely was scared that, my God, if there's a major earthquake, that whole structure could collapse and people could die. And that's what scared me in the first place.
I remember you saying that 4 years ago.
And, you know, maybe in hindsight, maybe the water problem is a blessing in disguise, because let's say everything was smooth, perfect. People were living there right now. There was a gym to go work out and then have a beer after.
Yeah.
And tomorrow's there's a major earthquake. We might be having a horrible tragedy. So maybe the bad digging in the water, hey, it could be a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, it's possible. But it is just so unfortunate. I mean, in some cases, candidates and people in the community are pointing fingers at, Mayor Voss and the council. In other circumstances, you could say it was just a terrible luck, that the developer ran into all these challenges. Now, you could say, well, maybe they didn't do their homework and didn't prepare properly. But the end result is that we've got a hole in the ground on Poway Road. It's an eyesore. And is a sidewalk even open there, or did they?
I think it is, because a lot of people complained about that.
Yeah.
I know, a few people at city council used to talk about the sidewalk. So I think you can still walk there, but why would you?
Well, yeah. Why would you?
Yeah.
But I'm sorry. Go ahead.
One thing I wanted to say is, and I did this a couple times at the council meeting, because I often talk at the council meeting.
You do?
Yeah.
I see you. I see the video.
And I've even been criticized for talking, because apparently that's not enough to some people. But I think it's good to talk at a council meeting, and I wish more people would do that, number one. But I used a little bit of my former comedian a couple times when I had referenced at a council meeting. If one didn't know there was going to be water issues at the Outpost, one only had to look at the last tenant on that parcel of land, which was Poway Irrigation.
Yeah, I remember that.
And we talked about that, where I even said, I feel bad because maybe I should have bought a few more sprinklers over the years.
I remember that was like a really old school irrigation shop that had been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Wasn't there like a really big tree there?
Yeah, I believe so. And then the old office building for the chieftain.
Yeah. They used to have their printing presses in there back at one time. It's interesting to roll the clock back and see, just in the last 4 years, I mean, we're dealing with all the construction, but it's to remember what used to be there. Sometimes we kind of forget about some of that.
Yeah.
But to your point, it's interesting because it is private property, right? It's not like the city council can, sort of jump in and be the construction manager, the property manager, the architect, and they can't do it.
It's like, for example, like some people are good with cars and some don't know anything. So if your car's not starting, chances are you're going to take it to the mechanic, and the mechanic's going to supposedly fix it. But let's just say he totals your car even worse. Is it your fault? I mean, you relied on the expertise of others, an auto mechanic. And I think even the council have relied on the expertise of engineers and developers, and they get the blame sometimes.
Well, I think one angle of blame, and I think you mentioned it earlier, is that, to use the analogy, maybe they picked an auto mechanic that only had worked on one car and only worked on the trunk.
That's why you always need to vet.
You got to vet them. Yeah, that makes sense. We're getting some questions on the live stream already. They're piling in. You want to take some questions?
Sure.
So, so just for the audience, just so you know, we are a live stream. We're on Facebook and YouTube. So Yuri and I will be having a conversation. I've got some questions and ideas and comments, but we want to entertain your thoughts and ideas too. So let's kind of go down the list here. We got a few questions and a few other comments. So this is from Ed Franklin.
Yeah.
And he says, yes, good call, Yuri. Economics play a part. So I think we're talking, this is from the earlier conversation. Ed goes on to say, why mayor? Like, why are you running for mayor and not a council member?
Well, that's a good question. And if there wasn't district elections, I probably would start at a lower level, but I live in District 4 and I am very happy with Caylin Frank and I wouldn't want to run against her. Plain and simple. If it was somebody else, maybe I would have started off at a district first, but I fully support Caylin Frank. I said it on a Zoom on February 2nd, 2021, when she did the amendment for the thrift shops, which is something that's very important for me because of memories with my parents, memories with my wife. When she did that, even though they might not even come, the fact that they're allowed to was the whole point. And that's when she became my council member, and I fully support her. And as long as she's District 4, I'm not going to run for District 4. And I'm certainly not going to move to another district because the housing prices are just a little bit rough.
A little, yeah, especially these days. Yeah, pull your mic a little closer so make sure the audience can hear you. No, just let's go back to the thrift stores. They haven't found a home yet, have they?
No, the actual church ones. No, they haven't. But there is a great thrift shop that I am an avid fan of, and that's Rerun's Resale Shop on Poway Road in the Lienzo Charo Shopping Center.
Yeah, that's a good one.
My wife and I are there literally every week. The staff is wonderful. It's the best. Their prices are great, and it goes to a good cause, the seniors. The seniors are very important to me, and I'll tell you why. I've been criticized by some saying, oh, you've done nothing for the seniors. Well, I think I have. I've spoken on their behalf, and if you look at my flyer later in my candidate statement, it'll be quite clear that I was the first one to talk about seniors. I'm the first one to talk about a committee, a residential district review committee. But here's the emotional part for me. I went to the thrift shops as a teenager with my parents. My father passed away in 1999, and then I'd go to reminisce with my mother at the thrift shops because it made her happy because she was with my dad all the time there. And so we'd go there and everything. And then, like everything in life, my mother got ill. I'm very fortunate to have a wonderful wife that I love dearly and who used to be a caregiver at a facility in Rancho Bernardo many years ago. And she took care of my mother in certain aspects where a son can't do something for his mother.
Yeah.
And my wife and I took care of my mother till the very end when she had to go to a facility and she died peacefully. And the thrift shops mean more to me than just, oh, I got a good old book.
Yeah.
It's loving memories that I will cherish for the rest of my life.
Well, there is a lot of reasons why so many people supported the thrift stores. Like they either had a personal, emotional connection like you do. Maybe they were members of the church and were supporters of it. And then other people depended upon those thrift stores for, home goods and clothing and a lot of other things. So, you would think that there's so much vacant property on Poway Road up in the business park. I'm not sure what the status is up there. You would hope they would find a place for those thrift stores to land. But to your point, rent ain't cheap.
No. And speaking of rent, I brought this up years ago in a council meeting where instead of building new buildings and new stores, why don't we fill existing empty buildings on Poway Road especially? And now it's, of course, a popular theme amongst other candidates. But here's the thing. Why is there so many empty buildings? And this is before the current economy with inflation and everything. 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, there were still empty buildings on Poway Road. and the economy was good. I personally think that either there's some individuals or some companies that are purposely putting the rent so ridiculously high, knowing full well that nobody's dumb enough to rent the space because they can't make a profit unless they're selling something illegal. And they're using it as a tax write-off for maybe some more successful ventures elsewhere in San Diego or God knows where, LA, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, there might be reasons for it. It has tax write-off part of it. I mean, I think most landlords would prefer to have a tenant in there than not. But
sometimes they do better with no tenant, because if they're making good money on another project, their taxes are a lot lower, saying, oh my God, I lose $5,000 a month every month here.
Yeah, but then their profit's a lot lower too. So, it's tricky, because also if they lower the rent too low, then it's hard to get it back up to where they want it to be. So it's an interesting game. There's
now I don't know if the city has the ability to either put pressure on a property owner. I don't think so, but maybe they can also try to give an incentive. That's something that, if it's within the law, I would look into that and talk to the city attorney and say, can we not threaten them, but offer them some type of incentive to fill vacancies? I don't know if that's possible or not. If I'm fortunate enough to be in that hall, in City Hall, I'll ask the city attorney, Alan Fenstermacher, if that's even a possibility. I personally don't know for sure.
Yeah, it's tricky too, because it is private, like you say, private property. And once the government is in there kind of manipulating businesses, it can get it like, they pick winners and losers. But there are things I think they can do. Other candidates have talked about it. Maybe expediting the permitting process, because when they move in, they're going to have to do a remodel. There's probably going to be a permit. So yeah, there might be some things that can be done. So we got a few more questions.
Oh yeah, let's hear.
Okay, let's go down the list here. Mike Devine is on the list. Hey guys, how you doing, Mike?
Hi, Mike.
And Ed Franklin. This is a new Yuri. I like it. Okay. And this is from another candidate, Tony Russo.
Oh, hey, Tony.
If my private property was an eye for my neighbors, I will put my last dollar that I would be fined. I assume he meant eyesore.
Oh,
right? Is that what that was? If my private property was an eyesore for my neighbors, I will put my last dollar that I would be fined. Common sense. If you build in a flood zone, you will hit water.
That's true. And for example, speaking of flood zones, there was talk of putting housing in the Big Stone Lodge area, and that's another future Outpost disaster if that were to take place. It is in a floodplain. So my recommendation, and if one day I have any say in the matter, is make it like a historical park. Like keep the stones in certain places, put some swings, some little merry-go-rounds for little kids to play, have some picnic tables for families to have lunch, and have like a monument type plaque to show in 1888 this was a stable.
Yeah.
In 1930 it was a dance hall. And show like the history of Poway, and have it be something for the next generation to have a picnic and for kids to play.
Yeah,
that's what I would do.
And I think it's a great idea. To your point, it is a floodplain. But my understanding is that the city, is it the city housing authority, or
it's been sold to the housing authority, so that's why a lot of people are worried.
Right. So it would have to be sort of sold again, right, to maybe back to the city, and then declared a park in some way. But that's what a mayor should be leading the charge on, right? Okay.
And if I have that opportunity, I will throw my 2 cents in, so to speak, and maybe certain things might change.
Okay. Here's a couple more comments here. This is for Mariana Benedict Basila. It was not terrible luck. Okay, I guess we're talking about the Outpost here. There were plenty of people warning them about the high water table at the Outpost prior to the start of the project. That's true.
That is true.
Yeah. So, but they hit water.
But they hit water. And sometimes I think, I'm just going to say it, sometimes some politicians are too egotistical, where they don't want to admit that they might have made an error in judgment.
Some politicians.
Well, I'm trying to be semi-neutral here, But no,
Yeah.
in all seriousness, like if more politicians actually listen to the people,
Mm-hmm.
things might be a little bit better in society in general. Like, for example, with my residential district review committee that I will have if I am the mayor,
Mm-hmm.
it will be once a month at City Hall. It will be no appointments. It will be no chairperson. It'll be, hey, John, what district do you live in? And you'll say, I live in District 3. I'm like, okay, what's the issues in District 3 that bother you?
Mm-hmm.
Then Bob will come and I'll say, Bob, what district do you live in? I live in District 1. Oh, what's bothering you in District 1? And they will talk at the podium and there will be no running 3-minute clock. You're going to finish your thoughts, your statements, and we're going to listen and we're going to go back and forth. And granted, not everybody's going to be happy because nobody will ever be happy completely.
Mm-hmm.
But I think more people will be satisfied and happy with that district review committee because there will be dialogue, there will be back and forth, there will be listening, and there will be discussion on both sides. And let me tell you this, there will be less angry people in this town after that committee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that seems to be a common theme in terms of is City Hall, is City Council, are they listening? And are they like truly listening and responding to the needs of the constituents? And I think it's a fair point. It's a fair comment, and opening up a committee to kind of break it down and dive into the detail, because you can only do so much detail at a city council meeting,
Yeah.
right? That's a sound idea. So good for you.
Thank you.
Okay.
And also, like, what will differentiate my committee from, say, the BRC or the Parks and Rec or any other committee is there isn't going to be like a boss of that district, because then somebody could be District 1 representative and they're going to say, well, he's so-and-so's friend. Everybody's going to be equal.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to talk, Bob's going to talk, Jim's going to talk, and you're all going to be equal. There's not going to be, I'm better than Bob.
Okay.
Everybody's on even Steven here.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about a situation just exactly this in District 2, and it's at the Stone Ridge at the farm in Poway.
Yeah.
And I assume you were at the meeting when that couple came forward, and they were distressed,
and they have every right to be.
So let's talk a little bit about the farm in Poway. What are your thoughts on the project? What do you like? What do you dislike? Run me through that.
Okay, we'll go back in time to 2020 election.
Okay.
I personally voted no on the farm.
Mm-hmm.
It passed overwhelmingly, I believe 63%.
Yeah.
At the time, I was like, I'm disappointed. The next day, I got over it. Okay, and why did I get over it? Because the whole point was whether you were for or against the farm, you had the right to cast your ballot. That's what democracy is all about.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we're not all happy with elections. 2020 is a prime example.
Yeah, right.
But to be able to cast your ballot is the main thing. In retrospect, after the fact, about 6 months after, and even a year after, it was the only alternative, and it was the best alternative, because the owner, I believe, I think it's Michael, but Schlesinger.
Mm-hmm.
I always get confused with like the director, John Schlesinger,
or Dr. Laura.
Yeah. It was a potential fire hazard.
Oh,
plain and simple. If they did not do anything with the farm, that was a potential fire hazard that could have been worse than 2003 or 2007. It was the Amazon jungle in North Poway.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as what is now taking place, there's always going to be issues. I think what needs to be done is the city, the ownership group, the developers, the engineers, contractors should all get together and look at what works and what doesn't work. Now, as far as the lady that was there the last week or so, I feel very bad for that lady, and she has every right to be upset, because not only does she lose the obvious, the views.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know golf courses are not as popular as they once were. That's why they haven't made Caddyshack 3 yet. But there's something needs to be done. And I remember even Mayor Voss said he's going to look into something to try to solve as best as they can the problem with maybe some trees, some higher fencing to give her family privacy, because she mentioned how a construction worker was like waving.
Yeah.
That's intrusive. That's horrible. So I hope and pray that that gets resolved where everybody is at least, if not happy, content.
Well, it seemed like her complaint was, and I'm going to have the numbers wrong, but there was supposed to be like a 40-foot buffer between the properties, between the new home that's being built and her property line. But then it was reduced to like 26 feet or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened there? Did the developer break a rule, or did a rule change? What's happened there?
That I'm not sure, but like everything with projects in this town, read the fine print.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anything was amended or if somebody cheated. I have no idea. But one thing that needs to be done, especially with the farm, is, and I brought this up in the past, where we're supposed to have like I think a dog park near
Mm-hmm.
there, and of course the butterfly entrapment.
Yeah.
What if not enough people are looking at butterflies? What if not enough people are walking their dog? 2, 3, 4, or 5 years down the line, hey, we can put about 5 houses in that spot.
Mm-hmm.
Is that language written in the contract? Is that language written in the document, the original plans? I don't know. I'm not sure. But somebody needs to make sure, because there could be more houses there. And one of the issues that I've always talked about is Prop FF. Now, Prop FF didn't apply for the farm because we had the right to vote.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have the right to vote on anything on Poway Road. Now, I don't believe this will ever happen, but let's just say one day they want to build the Space Needle
Okay.
on Poway Road.
Mm-hmm.
People can amend a zoning law. It's happened before.
Well, if not a Space Needle, maybe an Amazon building.
Well, that's already that we've got enough of those.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get to that later in the podcast. But let's just say, for argument's sake, I'm trying to be humorous at times, but let's just say somebody built something that's so out of the blue that it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And technically it's legal because they can amend it, or it's written into the rules that they can do pretty much anything they want. We're all going to go bananas, but we don't have any say to vote on it. I believe that Prop FF should be re-examined and possibly amended, not by me or a council member, but by the people. Put it on a ballot one day. Say, do you agree with the current zoning of Poway Road and the Poway Road general plan, or should there be revisions? And should we be able to one day vote on certain aspects of that revision?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, hopefully, one day.
Yeah, it seems to me that if there are amendments to that, it would have to go to the people. I mean, that's kind of the way that's why Prop FF went to the people back in the 80s when it was approved.
November 1988, 10,960 people voted yes on Prop FF, most of whom are no longer with us after 34 years.
Mm-hmm.
But nearly 49,000 of us have to live with it every day.
You know, it's surprising to me that when they passed Prop FF, the rationale was, we want to keep development at bay. We want to retain our character of our city. We value the open space and the trails. That was the impetus of Prop FF. But it's strange to me that it didn't apply to the whole city, that it only applied to certain parts of the city. Some people might argue, well, only in the wealthy areas of Poway, and Poway Road was excluded from that.
You can look at that both ways. It was protecting the large acreage of ranches, or you could say, well, you got to come in through San Diego Freeway through Poway Road. That's going to be the city aspect of it. it can cut both ways, but generally speaking, I think the majority of Powayians will say it was protecting the north. Large family homes, large ranches. I remember seeing lots of horses back in the day, and even in the late 90s, I saw a lot of horses. I think the last horse I saw was a parade.
You know, with one of your opponents was here, and we talked about that, how we hadn't seen a horse roaming around on Poway Road or on Community or Midland. But another person here in Poway that I know took a picture of one and posted it online. It's the first time I've seen one.
Yeah.
But you're right. I think with all the construction, the increased traffic, it's just less and less friendly for horses to be on the road.
True.
You know. Now, what about like with Prop FF? Does that include the Metate area, those meadows?
I'm not sure on that because I've heard different stories. However, the one parcel at the end, which is currently zoned for one house, could possibly be rezoned for 50. That's been a topic of discussion from one of the candidates in the past who might have proposed that. Don't be surprised. Who's going to buy that parcel of land if they can only build one house? Maybe someone who wants a big house. That's fine. And the owner of that parcel of land has every right to sell it because nobody's on it. Nobody's doing anything with it. So currently it's zoned for one house. I personally hope if it does get sold that some wealthy gentleman or lady buys that parcel of land and builds their big dream home and then end the discussion. But I have a terrible fear that it could one day be 50 homes. And why, you ask? I'll tell you. You brought this up before our meeting, so I thought I'd plug this. This is my flyer that I sent out.
You hold it a little higher so people can see. Yeah. There it is. Yeah.
Most of you probably got this in the mail within the past few days. The biggest problem our city is suffering with is the unfair inflated housing mandates of Sacramento. Now, I know people like to blame the local electors here, but it's Governor Newsom who is in bed with the developers. I'll just be blunt. I'm not saying, and I've been accused kind of in the past of not wanting to build any houses in the city of Poway. No, we have to build houses. That's common sense. That's progress. Yeah, there's going to be lots of homes built in the coming years, but I don't believe that there should be 1,618 potential housing units in the city of Poway, most of which, about 75 to 90%, are going to be in South Poway and Poway Road. And as I stated in the GVCA forum, if I'm elected mayor, I will petition every elected official in the great state of California and all 58 municipalities who believe that each individual city should base their own housing needs and assessments on just that, actual needs and availability, and not quotas. And I have spoken to a couple of elected officials who share my sentiment, and I know more will follow. And depending, if I'm elected, I guarantee you, I will gather signatures of elected officials and I will personally hand deliver it to Governor Newsom on the steps of the Capitol building in Sacramento. And we will go from there, including but not limited to possibly even the California U.S. Supreme Court. Now, I don't know if I will succeed or if I will fail, but if given an opportunity by the voters of Poway, we're going to find out. I'm not afraid to get knocked out, but I'll never throw in the towel.
Okay. It's like Rocky Balboa right here. So yeah. This is good. I mean, because you have some firm principles on some of these topics and you want to take it all the way to the top.
Yeah. You're never going to succeed if you don't try.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because for the longest time, the state of California, municipalities, counties, have been very resistant to development in a lot of areas. And Sacramento had been passing certain legislation to slow down development. but they flipped. Governor Newsom and the state legislature now are suddenly really aggressively trying to build more.
Yes.
Because there is a housing deficit, but
Well,
they're assigning it quotas to all these different cities. And to your point, some cities can handle it better than others.
yes, one size does not fit all.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not an extremist saying, oh, we're never going to build a house. Of course not.
Mm-hmm.
Housing is necessary. That's a given. But how much? That's the problem. I saw it was an article within 3-4 weeks ago where Governor Newsom was at a press conference, and he had, I don't know if they were real construction workers or developers or engineers, but they had the orange suits and whatnot.
Yeah.
And they were holding signs that say, build more houses now, build houses faster.
Mm-hmm.
At the expense of the quality of life of its current residents.
Mm-hmm.
That's not fair. That's not fair at all. And why? Okay, here's another thing. 1 out of every 8 people in America live in California.
Mm-hmm.
That's 12.5%. California, if it was a country, is like the 7th or 8th largest economy in the world.
Right.
Governor Newsom wants to make that 1 out of 7 living in California of the whole United States, make it 14.5%. And we're all going to be in sardine houses, pigeon houses and sardine cans on Poway Road. That's not right.
Yeah.
When you go drive down to Mira Mesa and you're going south on the 15 and you turn to your right,
yeah,
it looks like tenements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of does.
It doesn't even look like apartments or condos or townhouses. It looks like tenements. That's going to happen on Poway Road if we don't fight.
Well, what do you think about that Fairfield project? Because that's going to be a big 4-story apartment building. I mean, how many units are going in there?
The last time I had heard, and I could be wrong, it was like 1,100, I think, something like that.
So tell me your thoughts on that particular project.
Well,
I mean, this is replacing your beloved thrift stores.
True. I'm not 100% happy with it, but it's already a done deal. Whether I win on November 8th, it's not like I can say, okay, guys, pack it up. You're not building here.
Right.
So my opinion, for what it's worth, is squat. I could say I hate the whole thing, but I'm still going to have to be like, welcome to Poway. So it has its issues, to put it blunt, but there's nothing I can do about it. And those who think they can are either misinformed big time or they're lying to the public. Everything that is signed already, even if I hate it, there's nothing I can do about it. There's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing you can do about it. It's a done deal. You can't break the law and say, no, get the rebar out. We might want to do that with the Outpost, but in general, no, you can't tell people to go away. It's what's signed, sealed, and delivered is done. What I can change is the future. What is going to be happening one day, what they're going to try to do. And we can be more moderate growth and more realistic and also more accommodating to the needs of people and their opinions. That's what a committee might be for. But
there's really not a whole lot of places left to build in Poway, is there?
Oh, yeah, there is. We've touched on it already, the Metate parcel.
Right.
That's possibly going to happen one day.
In the crosshairs of someone.
Yes. But it's all about Sacramento. If Sacramento was like reasonable and neutral, we wouldn't have as many problems as we do. We'd have problems, and sure, some people would still be complaining, and rightfully so, but we wouldn't be in the mess that we're in today. And yes, there is still many more parcels of land that are possibly in danger.
Hey, we got some more questions.
Sure.
Let's take a few as they're coming in. And again, for the audience, we encourage you to type in your questions and comments if you're watching the live stream on Facebook or YouTube, and we'll share these and give Yuri a chance to respond to them. And let's scroll back. Where do we leave off? And Well, we have the chat board is just lighting up here.
Oh,
So,
yeah, I knew there would be some familiar names.
So, yeah, here's one from Delena Gilroy Olps. You could pull a public records request to find out. The information is out there. So I'm not sure. This is which project.
You know what? Let's be honest. Let's not mince words. Mrs. Olps is, of course, not a fan of mine because I was against the recall effort of Mayor Voss that was originated by her husband, Christopher Olps.
Mm-hmm.
See, I was waiting for this, and I'm glad you didn't hide it because I want people to know. Yes, I was against the recall effort of Mayor Voss, and I'll tell you why. Number one, it would have cost the taxpayers of this city in excess of $500,000 had it got on the ballot. Forget about if it actually had a recall. Just to get on that ballot would have taken money away from our fire department, our sheriff's department, other vital city services. Okay. Number two, if Mayor Voss had done something illegal with Carols by Candlelight, would he be seeking a third term on November 8th? Wouldn't he have resigned in disgrace? Okay. That was all a sham. And I'll tell you why it's a sham. Now, Mayor Voss is probably a lot more politically correct than I. And I respect him for that because he's taken a lot of abuse, even from me. And he's never thrown it back. And I respect him for that. He truly is thick-skinned and can take it. In 2010, Mayor Voss had a recall effort against Miss Betty Rexford.
I remember that.
Okay. Now, whether it had something to do with fire trucks or other inappropriate things in a neighborhood, I'm not sure. I've heard different stories either way. But ever since Mayor Voss was successful in that recall, even though he didn't get her seat, he came up about 150 votes shy. I believe John Mullen, I think it was 152 if I'm not mistaken, but somewhere in that range, got her seat. And ever since then, 2 years later, Mayor Voss got on the council, 2 years later in 2012, got on the council. And every year since 2012, around December, or sometimes even in October or November, there's talk about, did he not file the right tax code on the charitable thing? Is he not paying taxes? How much money goes to the children? If he was doing something illegal, he'd be a distant memory. Okay. I'm sure everything is above board. And number one, he's raised over $1 million for children with cancer and other terrible diseases. Look, I'm running against Mayor Voss, okay, because I feel that I can do better in the city, but I have no animosity towards Mayor Voss. I regret some of the things I even said to him. And if he's listening, Mayor Voss, I apologize. If I ever truly hurt you and offended you, it was political fodder. But that's why every year around this time, perpetrated by members of some Facebook groups, shall remain nameless.
Okay.
So a lot of longitude and latitude involved in the name of the group. They talk about Carols by Candlelight. Okay. Every year. Get over it, people.
Well, it's interesting because that topic comes up. You're right. Every year, as we get into the holiday season, and in my opinion, they have done a good job of exposing the issue. Now, the fact that it's been exposed and there hasn't been any repercussions, what does that mean? I mean, does it mean that it is in fact above board, or does it mean that it's really not being investigated properly?
District attorneys like to make a name for themselves. And if they can bust a politician, they're on easy street after that. If Mayor Voss had done something illegal, he'd be living in Texas right now. Above board is the finite answer. Okay. It's annoying. It's really getting annoying. And I fell for it a little bit in 2018. I had a KUSI interview on Halloween night. Bad night to be on TV, by the way.
Viewership's a little bit low.
Yeah. And I even had mentioned at the time there's some possible irregularities. I was duped. I followed the social media buzz, and I was an idiot for doing that. And I learned. First time you run for election, you don't always know what you're doing. I'm more knowledgeable now, and I know what I'm doing now. And I'll tell you a funny story. Earlier this year, as a matter of fact, I forget what month because I go to so many council meetings and talk. I had spoken about something during public comment, and I could hear in the background a lot of noise. In fact, I even heard profanity, the F word, and it was about me.
Really?
Yeah. And you know who said it?
Who?
Betty Rexford herself.
Really?
Yeah. You want to know why?
Tell us.
Because I defended Mayor Voss on a false charge of criminality about the recall effort. I stand by that statement, and I'll say it again. I will always defend an innocent person on a false charge of criminality. That's who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Even a man whom I wish to replace as your mayor.
Well, Betty Rexford certainly is no fan of Mayor Voss. I mean,
no, and neither of me as well.
Right.
I guess you've have gained some credibility when Miss Rexford hates you.
Just the drama in our city is amazing.
I love it.
We have some more questions. Okay, let's go down this list. This is another one from Mariana Benedict Basila. The Butterfly Farm is a business that will have a profit-making school with field trips. So I guess they're going to be bringing in students from some of the schools and visiting the butterflies.
Hopefully. It's better than some of the things that are going on in the Poway Unified School District, I suppose.
Yeah, but I think what she's implying is that from a lot of other places in the county. I know there's some people that are skeptical that the butterfly farm will ever be built. They just think it's a marketing gimmick that was used to get the proposition to pass. But
I wouldn't doubt that, and it's quite possible that might be true.
Yeah, so I guess we'll
find out when the first rebar is installed.
So I guess it's trust but verify. I don't know what it is, but we're going to find out.
Well, I said it. I mean, let's just say it got built and then nobody cares and nobody's going, kind of like a council meeting. Then, they're going to tear it down and they're going to build like 5 houses on that spot. I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. It's kind of like what they're doing in Carmel Mountain Ranch, how they're filling in that golf course.
Oh, Mr. Schlesinger owns that, or did own that property, I believe.
The Carmel Mountain golf. I know he owns the Eskin.
Oh, where the DoubleTree is. I'm not 100% sure, so I don't want any litigation. But from what I've heard, I could be wrong, that Schlesinger bought the DoubleTree, and they're building houses right now as we speak.
Wow. Well, he's got a lot going on.
Yeah. I mean, he's made friends in Los Angeles and San Diego County.
So one other comment about Schlesinger is that when the proposition was put forward, we were told that McNamara would be, in charge of the project and Schlesinger would be out. But apparently Schlesinger is still involved. Is that true?
From what I understand, but again, property rights.
But wasn't that in the language of the proposition that the voters voted on?
I'm not sure if it was exactly in detail in the document itself. I have to read it again, and that was like a few years. But again, property owners' rights. Why is he obligated to sell 100% of it? Maybe he sold 10% or 20% or 50%. The people voted. We got to live with it. At the time, I wasn't happy with the farm. I was one of the 37%. But the next day, I got over it. I think maybe we should all try and just move forward.
That's a Glenn Fry song, isn't it? Get over it. Okay, here's a couple more here. This is another one from Ed Franklin. Yuri is growing up right in front of us using common sense. So Ed's a fan.
Thank you, Ed.
Mike Devine chiming in. And this is one of the few forums that Mike Devine is not banned from.
Yes, and mine as well. The City and the Country Forever. I'll tell a funny story before we read his question.
Okay.
About a little over a year ago, I think, my Facebook group, The City and the Country Forever, was a public group where anybody could join. And my friend Mike Devine was doing his usual chatter with Christopher Olps, of all people. And I don't remember the specifics, but they were going back and forth. And I didn't want it to be, like you said, a boxing match. So I kind of made a Facebook GIF that showed like two guys shaking hands, and I'm like, let's just make the peace.
Yeah.
And I didn't even think any more of it. I went and had something to eat, and I came back on Facebook, and I was going to go on Poway Neighbors. I couldn't find Poway Neighbors. What happened to Poway Neighbors? I've been on there for like a year or two. I type up, it's like Poway Neighbors doesn't exist.
Oh.
Then I found it. I resubmitted like applying. An hour later, I got accepted like 10 minutes later, and then I went and did something. I went and checked Poway Neighbors, and then it was completely gone. And I'm like, how did I get banned? Just because I know Mike Devine, I get banned from a Facebook group? I defend people to have peace and not fight. A lot of people on my Facebook group wanted me to kick out Mike Devine. I wasn't going to kick out Mike Devine. If he did something really bad, yeah, I would. But he made his opinions. He spoke the truth on 99% of it. If you don't agree with it, fine. Debate him, argue with him, fine. But don't tell me how to run my Facebook group and say, get rid of Mike Devine. If he pisses me off, I know this is, well, it's after 9. If he
Sorry, we started a little late.
Then yeah, I would kick him out. Now, my Facebook group used to be open to the public, and then people like Mrs. Olps, a whole bunch of other Kool-Aid gang people were using profanity on my group. So yeah, I blocked them. I had to. This was not an X-rated Facebook group with just vulgarity and profanity. So yeah, I turned it into a private group, so that way it wouldn't get out of hand. And for the record, I was banned from Poway Underground first, or blocked and banned, before I blocked and banned Christopher Olps, for the record. Because had he not blocked me, I would not have blocked him. But
the drama, the Facebook drama.
Casa.
Okay. Yeah, it's crazy. You know, it's interesting too. It's like, you know, the Poway Neighbors group, by the way, is a really great Facebook group.
It used to be for me, but now I can't get into it.
It's too bad. They're really hardcore about no politics.
Oh, but I didn't even post anything on there.
So,
it's because some of the administrators are friends with Christopher Olps. And that's why I get banned by a group I didn't even have a problem with.
Wow.
But that's okay. You know, if I ever need a handyman or, you know, a plumber, there's still a Yellow Pages.
Really? Well, you could Google it for sure.
Well, that too.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of other Poway groups that are kind of like that.
No,
you know,
all the other Poway groups are fine. I haven't had any issues.
Yeah. The Poway Community and Neighbors.
That's a good one.
That's another one. And and just full disclosure, I'm an
administrator as well.
And it was because the guy that started it, he said, I'm overwhelmed. Can someone help? And a few people jumped in, and we just kind of
took over.
Yeah, we just kind of make sure the rules are followed is all. You know, keep the companies and their business ads on Fridays only and that sort of. And what's up with all these people trying to get all the lint and dust out of our ventilation systems? Those guys are aggressive. Anyways, I digress. Okay, so let's get to Mike's point here.
Sure. Sorry, Mike.
And where was it? And here it is. Mike Devine says, the lady at Stone Ridge has a lot of political clout. Have we determined that the 40-foot setback was really true? Again, I don't know the answers to this.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, but she was very passionate, and I was there. I saw it, and I even watched it on the replay, and she has every right to be upset. And I think even Mayor Voss said they're going to look into it with the owners of the property, the developers, everything, and they're going to try to make some type of concession to make that lady and her family, if not happy, at least content.
Yeah, so I mean, Mike goes on to say setbacks generally cannot be changed, but it goes against the narrative. So, you know, that was just one of the things we were wondering. Did the city council change the setbacks? Did a bureaucrat in city halls change the setbacks? Or did the developer break the rule? Or is there a misunderstanding?
Well, there's always going to be a scapegoat or an excuse of, well, we didn't send that email and so-and-so didn't realize. Whether that's true or, you know, it was, whether it's deliberate or incompetent, either way, a family is upset. And I believe even Mayor Voss said something to the effect like they're going to look at maybe putting trees to have more privacy where nobody can look into the lady's backyard. And I hope something like that happens.
Yeah, I hope so too. It's got to be rough on those property owners because they bought homes on a golf course for a reason. Then the world changed on them, and now finally the construction's starting, and yeah, it's rocking their world. So that's a tough one. A couple more comments here. Ed Franklin goes on to say he must have secretly listened to my podcast. You know, Ed has a podcast.
Yeah, I have to get some information later from you tonight because I'd love to listen to him.
He's the Ed Franklin No Limits podcast, and he's the former president and CEO of the Poway Chamber. He's got it's a really good podcast. So, and he's a longtime Poway guy. Yeah. So, here's Miss Olps with a comment. Chris had the documents sent over from Kevin McNamara in 2020. It said right in the docs that minor changes like setbacks could be changed after voting.
Okay.
So that might be part of what's happening with that particular person.
Quite possible.
I'm speculating. I'm just a dude with a podcast. I'm not like a city engineer. No. Mike Devine goes on. The best solution to low income housing was Brown's senior trailer. Not sure what that's about.
I'm not either.
So we'll get a couple more here because I know everyone's now jumping in because they like to see their name on the screen.
I'm just curious. My ego here. Does it tell you how many people are watching?
Yeah, right now our live stream is we have 12 people on the live stream, which is kind of nice.
Yeah.
And then, we get way more views and downloads afterwards.
True.
They watch it on YouTube or Facebook, or they listen on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or whatever. But it's nice to have the live stream audience.
Yes, and I'm glad that there are a lot of viewers because whether you like me or hate me, chances are you're going to watch.
Yeah, and I think that's what you got, some lovers and haters here that are on the live stream. And I want to get to everyone's question because that's part of the fun. It's part of the community forum aspect of what we're doing here. Mariana Benedict Basila says Prop FF protects the citizens from the council members being able to make zone changes in most areas, increasing the density of the property without full transparency. We have a representative style of government. Prop FF supports this idea. It's not perfect, but the alternative is untenable.
Ask that question to the average person when they look at Poway Road. They don't have any say. They can't vote on anything on Poway Road.
Mm-hmm.
So you can look at that statement and say, for certain things, it's good, but clearly for other things, it's very bad. And I believe that Poway Road should be protected one day, or at the very least, allow the voters of Poway, all however many registered voters there are, 21, 22,000, whatever it might be, put that on a ballot one day to say, can you vote on a future project on Poway Road, or will you not be able to vote on a future project on Poway Road?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure it'll pass more than 50% plus one vote to be able to vote on future projects on Poway Road.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Doubt.
I'm sure voters would love to have that, but it kind of goes back to the other point. I'm just being devil's advocate here, that it is private property, and so now you've got people telling private property owners what they can and cannot do.
Good point, and I'm glad you said that. It's, again, let's just say, for example, I'll use Rite Aid as an example, because there's technically nothing to generalize on Poway Road right now. Rite Aid has been empty for like 5 years. So let's say they want to put, I don't even know if they still exist, a Save-On in that Rite Aid building. Then you, me, and every other voter should have no opinion or say. I mean, you can have an opinion, but you should have no voting right on there. But let's just say they want to build Magic Mountain amusement park where that Rite Aid is. Then yeah, we should be able to vote and say we approve it or we don't approve it. That's what I mean when I say about Prop FF on Poway Road. I'm not saying we can't have that 12 studio apartments there, but if it's going to be 10 different studio apartments and they're 5 feet tall stories, then yeah, it should be allowed with Prop FF to vote on things.
So then it becomes not on a specific project. It's more about zoning.
Zoning, basically.
And that was kind of what happened with the farm. Now, granted, it was only one project for that zone.
but pretty big, 160 homes, I
Yeah,
believe.
pretty significant.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Have you driving up there on a Spola? I mean, it's like, I mean, it's amazing what those earth mover trucks can do.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen them at the Fairfield project, and it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think if you were to ask voters, they would love to have Prop FF for the whole city.
Well, yeah.
And again, I'm surprised that when they did it, they didn't do it for the whole city. You know, so
Yeah.
let's move on. We got a couple
Sure.
more comments here. And this is Mike Devine, and it looks like he's talking to Miss Olps.
Oh.
So this might be a little bit of the back and forth amongst the
Yeah.
folks in the chat. So I'm going to kind of keep moving on from this. And okay, again, I think the two of them are having a conversation. So
I bet it's a lively one.
it is.
My eyes are bad, so
okay,
I didn't bring my glasses.
Now this is, I think, a fair question here. Okay, so, and this is from Miss Olps, and she says, wow, he is really taking to loving Voss. Maybe I'll just vote for Voss. So I want to talk about that.
Anybody can vote for whoever they like. That's called democracy.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
But I think the underlying point is that in 2018, you, like, as you said, you were outspoken and criticized Mayor Voss on a number of other things, and now you've learned more and your opinions have changed.
I learned more about property rights.
Mm-hmm.
I learned more about zoning laws. I learned more about lies, secrets and lies.
Mm-hmm.
I learned more about innuendo. I learned more about false charges. I learned more about downright ugliness in politics.
Well, and that's good. I mean, it's good to, as you're a candidate, a second time, you're a better candidate as a result. And you've been doing your due diligence at City Hall. But what I've witnessed is that in many cases you are, and you've done so in this episode, of defending Mayor Voss.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're running against Mayor Voss.
I know.
So kind of help me.
It's a conundrum.
Yeah. So help me through that.
Okay. I don't have any animosity. I have no ill will, no bad feelings, no hard feelings against Mayor Steve Voss as a human being, as a person. I think he's taken a lot of heat, some deserved, but a lot not really his fault. Why am I running against him? Well, it's not so much that I'm running against him as much as I'm running for mayor of the city of Poway for the people. I want things to get better. I want things to be different. I want things to go back to certain ways of our tradition on December 1st, 1980. And I want things to, of course, be more progressive. He just happens to be the incumbent. So if he had retired 6 months ago and another person took over for 6 months, I'd be running against him or her. I have no ill will towards Mayor Voss, and yes, I will defend him when needed, if I feel it's appropriate, and I will compliment him and the council when I think they've done something good for the city and its people. It doesn't mean I can't run against him. I just feel that maybe I can do things different and perhaps even better.
So give me an example of something that you think that you believe you can do better with our city that is not being done by its current leadership.
Okay. Number one, I would listen more. I would have a committee to get input from people, because a lot of people don't go to the council meetings. I understand that. And I know people are busy, but everybody seems to go to the council meeting sometimes, like when the Amazon building's already done.
That went up fast, didn't it?
But it wasn't like it was a ghost town secret double probation meeting. It was on record. It's just nobody pays attention. I have a sad story to tell about politics and even Poway politics. I ran into a gentleman that I hadn't seen in like a year by chance. And I told him, I'm running for mayor again. And he knew I ran in 2018. He goes, oh, you're running for mayor again? All right. Who are you running against? And I go, Mayor Steve Voss. And he goes, he's still the mayor?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's a resident of Poway. And he didn't know. And I felt bad, but I had to tell that story. Well, I'm not going to tell his name or his address or his phone number.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about this with a number of other candidates. people are busy, they got a life, they've
Yeah.
got their challenges and their family
True.
issues and their career, and they're busy and scrambling and doing everything they can as parents and as, business people. Some people, they don't pay attention to
No.
city politics.
No.
They probably, some of them are now
Yeah.
because of what's happening around the city. There's been such radical changes in many of our neighborhoods. They were probably unaware of all the events that led up to the development. But it doesn't surprise me that
No.
there's, I mean, it's almost like Jay Leno, the man on the street, they ask some questions and people don't really know a lot of current events.
True. There's been several occasions at a council meeting. I don't have the specific dates, but if you go through, you could probably find them, where I was the only public speaker, whether it was public comment or a certain agenda item. Okay, there was one time where I think I spoke 3 or 4 times on different things, and I was the only one. And then there was a last item, I forget what it was, where it went through, and even the council had made a joke like, Yuri, you have anything to say? And I'm like, oh no, I'm done. Thank you.
So,
I wish more people would show up. I really do, because then there'd be more public awareness, number one. And then maybe the council would see a lot of people in the audience and go, okay, we got to work on trying to alleviate some of their concerns.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
It's a two-way street.
It is. And there have been incidents in our past where groups that have mobilized people to show up for meetings to try to influence the city council. Like a great example was the Poway Girls Softball League, that they brought in all of their athletes, and they knew it was going to be a jam-packed, and they moved the city council meeting to the Poway Center for the Performing Arts. Wow. And that's what led to the creation of Aubrey Park.
What year was that? Do you remember?
I'm going to guess that it was around 04, 05.
I was in Carmel Mountain.
Oh, no, actually it was before that. It might have been 02 when that all passed, because I remember it opened up around 06, 07 is when the park finally opened. I might have my dates wrong, but it's roughly that. Sure. My daughter was playing softball there at the time. It's a beautiful park. Yeah. But to your point, it'd be great to have more people involved. And in some cases, people aren't paying attention. In other cases, people don't feel like they're being heard. In other cases, maybe there's a little bit of, they don't feel passionate about any of the particular topics, right?
True.
Let's kind of shift gears, if you don't mind, and let's jump into something. We've been talking about development and all this other stuff. So let's go to crime, because I'm on like Nextdoor. You've gone on that Nextdoor, and
I just I really haven't gone on it, but I'm starting to. Obviously,
it's very different than a lot of the other Facebook groups. Nextdoor is, they kind of parse it down into little neighborhoods, which is kind of neat. They've got, I don't know, like 20 different neighborhoods just for Poway.
Sometimes that could be bad, because then they'll know where you live.
Well, yeah, maybe. But I often joke that it's like there's a bunch of like Mrs. Kravitzes from Bewitched, that are looking through their window and they see people on the street, suspicious people. In some cases, though, they've had doorbell cameras that have caught people breaking into cars. We've been having a lot more theft of vehicles. We've had catalytic converters has been the hot thing. There are cases of people breaking into homes and stealing cash and jewelry and other valuables, in some cases while the families are asleep in the house at the time.
I heard about that one story. That was frightening, because what if you startle them and they're scared? They might kill the people. I mean, crime has gone up. And I know that the moniker is Poway is the safest city in the county. And to some degree, I believe that is true. I've heard other, in years past, I believe it was Rancho Santa Fe that was at one time listed. And that makes sense, because, most homes are about 5 to 10 million over there. But yeah, Poway is one of the safest, if not the safest, but it's not going to be like that forever if we don't do something about it. And one of my plans is, if I'm elected, I'm going to increase the sheriff's department's budget and the fire department's budget if I can legally, just for the record. I'm not 100% sure if I could do that, based on mitigating factors like, are we having a surplus for the fiscal year or a deficit. I would also eliminate what I like to call a lot of pork in this city government.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we continually pay consulting firms 5 figures, 25,000, 30,000, and in some cases, maybe even 6 figures, 100 grand, to tell us what they recommend us to do on various issues? We have a good city staff. They're well paid. They're all intelligent. Why can't we all just get in a room, ask each other's opinions on whatever the topic or issue is, and say, that's a good idea. Oh, no, let's do it this way. And then work together and find a solution to do whatever the item might be, instead of paying a consulting firm to think for us. That's wasteful spending. You use some of that money to increase our sheriff's department anywhere from 1% to 5% annually. If I'm elected, that's what I'm going to do. If it's really a bad year financially, then yeah, they're only going to get 1% increase for the whole budget. If it's smooth sailing, then they're going to get 5%. Now, I don't know if I can legally do that. That's something I'm going to ask Mr. Fenstenmacher, our city attorney. If I'm totally out of line and he tells me that, then I'm going to apologize. And I'm going to say I was speaking brash and I didn't know exactly what I was talking about. But if it's legal to do based on budget restraints, I'm going to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a really interesting topic, because a significant portion of our city budget goes to the sheriff and to the fire department, right? Yeah.
The two most important entities for our safety.
Mm-hmm. No doubt about it. And yeah, Poway has traditionally been the so-called the safest city in the county. And depending on the survey and depending on if they're measuring, property crime or assault and battery and murder, it depends how you look at it. And other cities are competitive with us. I think sometimes Solana Beach does well. But when they have all of this new development coming in, a lot more people, there's going to be more congestion, more people,
more crime,
and probably more crime.
I don't doubt that one bit.
How would you address, just say, for example, this catalytic converter crisis? What can the city do, or the sheriff do?
Well, more patrols at night, probably. I know we are going to have some cameras to watch crime happen and prevent it, maybe deter people with a visible camera that says you're being videotaped. And one main thing is, who buys these catalytic converters when you bring them somewhere?
Well, my understanding is that it's not like they're installing it in someone else's car. They're taking out the precious metals and brokering them somehow.
But is there like a recycling place that takes these?
There must be some kind of a chop shop somewhere, is my guess.
Okay. Because if it's like when you're bringing in your soda can at the recycling to get your nickel, I don't know for sure, but they don't take materials like that, do they?
No. Well, it's got to be all like, kind of underground, you know what I mean? But my understanding is that there's things like copper and other metals in there that they can then resell.
But as long as they're selling to an underground dealer, that's something we can't control. But if a legitimate business is buying the copper and giving them like a recycling fee, then they need to be shut down and not do that anymore if that's the case.
Yeah, of course. I agree with you. I agree with you there. But I think to your point, more patrols at night, greater awareness. I mean, when you just have cops on the street, that's a deterrent for crime, for sure.
Like 4 years ago, I mentioned sometime 4 years ago, there was a gentleman at the council meeting during public comment who was talking about certain houses that were known to be drug houses. And I had said to you, why don't they put like an old cop car that's not needed right now in front of that suspected house? You won't see any cars drive up there if they see a police car. And that might put the drug dealer out of business. Yeah.
I mean, those are simple things that can be done. Or even because I know there's a volunteer sheriff, right? And they patrol the city, and, just more boots on the ground, I guess you could say, right? Could deter that. But that's a legitimate problem. And then we had that issue in the shopping center, the Creekside Shopping Center, when Poway bicycles used to be there and the
Yeah.
windows were
And
smashed
a few
in.
other businesses. And,
Yeah.
and then I heard there was, I believe it was either in Carmel Mountain or Forest Ranch, where an establishment had their windows broken like within hours of that incident here in Poway.
Why do you think this is happening? I mean, granted, it's not exclusive to Poway. Crime is
No.
up everywhere.
Yeah.
But why do you think that's going on?
People are suffering. Look, I made a comment the other night, yesterday at the council meeting about inflation. Used to have $100, fill your shopping cart so full that if you turn the corner too fast, some of your food falls out. $100 right now doesn't get the basket even half full. So everybody's suffering. So some people maybe don't want to work and they want the quick, fast money, and they unfortunately rob people, and that's terrible. And it should stop, obviously, but you can't control what the actions of some people. If you put more police presence, maybe somebody will be smarter and say, I'll think twice about doing something bad like that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think you're right. There are some people that are suffering and maybe taking desperate measures. But I think my theory is that a lot of this is the result of what happened in 2020 with the George Floyd protests. And there was all this defund the police, and there were rightful reasons for people to be upset with the police. I mean, how George Floyd died was tragic,
terrible,
horrible.
I saw the video that was horrible.
Yeah.
And what got me is when the man, before he went unconscious and passed away, he called for his mother. I shed a tear.
Yeah. I mean, it was so rotten.
It was terrible.
And it's, they're supposed to be serve and protect, and it was the opposite.
But let's not judge an entire organization on the actions of a few. I remember after 9/11, there was, I have some friends that are Middle Eastern, and they were called every name in the book.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Unfairly, because the actions of a few should not tarnish an entire race, an entire culture, an entire country. There's bad people no matter what color skin, no matter what faith, and then there's good people no matter what color skin, no matter what color faith. There's terrible things all over, not only this country but the world. And if we judge people on the actions of a few bad officers, that's not fair. I mean, I would venture to say that probably 99.9% of the officers in this country do a damn good job.
I agree with that.
They don't get paid as much as they should, and they risk their life every time they go out. And yeah, there's some bad ones, and the incident with Mr. Floyd was certainly one of the more popular and more exposed ones. But how many people don't see dash cam or the vest cameras? There's terrible things that happen somebody right now as we speak is being abused, maybe even killed, not just by an officer, but in general. Humanity is getting worse in general. And the key is to be tolerant, be understanding, get to know someone of a different faith, get to know someone of a different race, learn the qualities of them, teach the qualities yourself to them, and really just get to know people.
Right.
Because you can't change everybody. There's going to be some people that are just bad.
That's true.
That's life. But can't we all just get along?
Yeah, the Rodney King.
Rodney King.
Well, just to finish my point, is that I think as a result of the George Floyd protests, which I believe were rightful, the police departments kind of, in some cases, kind of backed off a little bit on policing crime. And then there were cases like they passed laws here in California where petty theft is no longer a felony, or it's a misdemeanor.
I'll get to that in a second.
Because they break into the Walgreens in San Francisco, and you know all about Walgreens.
Oh, yeah, I have a few stories to tell you about that in a few minutes. But back to your comment, the Black Lives Matter protest. There were two types of Black Lives Matter protests. There were the peaceful ones that expressed their right, their First Amendment rights. And then there were troublemakers that probably didn't give a damn about George Floyd. They just wanted to be reckless, break windows, and cause mayhem. And the good BLM protesters suffered for that. So I had no problem with people expressing their First Amendment rights in a peaceful protest, but I did have problem with some of the things that happened, like in Portland, Oregon, for example. It's always the same story. One rotten apple spoils a barrel. And that can be an analogy for any aspect.
It's true. Wow. Well, it's just, I guess, so your take here is, increasing the police force in Poway, and as a means to really fight some of the crime that we're experiencing.
Even the non-violent crimes, but are still annoying if, like, your car doesn't start in the morning because the converter's gone. Nobody got hurt, but you're not going to be happy when you got to go spend $1,000 to put it back in.
1,000? It's usually a lot more than that. It's crazy. That whole thing is unbelievable. Wow. Yeah. Can we take some more questions from the audience?
Sure.
Are you good?
Oh,
how are you doing on time, by the way?
Oh, I'll be here as long as you let me.
Okay. Well, we've been on an hour and a half. We still have a pretty solid.
We haven't even got to some topics that I'd like to talk about.
Well, we will.
Okay.
Because I will make sure that you get to say your fair piece.
Sure.
But we got a lot of live stream viewers, and I want to give them a shot to participate in this as well. So let's go back to our comments. And gosh, there's a lot more that are piling in. And let's see here. Let's see if we can find a. Okay, this is from our good friend Pete Neal.
Oh, hi, Pete.
And Pete has asked this question of other candidates, because right now, it's a 5-0 majority. It's 5 council members on the city council, and it often is a 5-0 vote.
Yes.
And so he says the 5 votes with 3 seats up, and let's just say, for example, you become one and the other 2 races for city council, let's just say the status quo candidate is elected. How would you handle that dynamic if you were proposing change and the other 4 were kind of for the, keep the ship steady on course?
Before I answer that specific question, I'll just say this. If you've ever watched a council meeting and they're majority time 5-0, most of the agenda items, if you added 5 new council members, District 6 through District 10, for example, it would probably be 10-0, because most of the 5-0 votes were common sense votes. Most people weren't going to argue about something that benefited the city and was the legal right way to do something. Now, I'm sure there's been some instances where, it looked like a status quo vote, but in general terms, most of the 5-0 votes would have been 10-0 votes if there were 5 extra council members.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point.
But now to the actual question of Mr. Neal.
Yeah.
If I'm fortunate enough to be elected mayor, number one, if I have a strong opinion, which I'm not most likely going to back down, I think my little 20% one vote is going to have a lot more influence over 4 different council members than the other way around.
Well, certainly, because you be the mayor.
Yes. And the mayor has a little bit more pull than a regular council member in general. But as far as the status quo term, we might all be in agreement on 90% of the issues. So if it is 5-0 or 4-1, it's probably the right decision anyways.
Yeah, it's a fair point. There are definitely issues that, to your point, that are kind of common sense issues. And, we can get people on opposite sides of the political spectrum, and they're probably going to agree on a lot of those topics. Okay.
And another point, like, for example, this question's been asked where someone is really like the total extreme, and then everything's going to be 4-1, and it's just going to be a longer council meeting to listen to that one protest vote, so to speak. And whether that benefits the city, I'm not sure, but they have every right to do that.
Yeah.
Protest.
In my opinion,
It might gain them more credibility with their constituents as well.
Yeah. Because
And that's perfectly fine.
Because I think the reason that people are elected is to represent the people, and if the people have objections, they want those issues heard. And at the same time, when people elect candidates based on their platform, they want that candidate, if they're elected, to stick to their guns and stand up
with your boots on.
Yeah. So, you know, if it's 4-1 and the one is protesting all the time, I think that's part of democracy.
Yes, I agree.
Now, at some point, it gets kind of frustrating.
And then they resign.
Yeah, like Mr. Cunningham, you know, and we've seen some of that kind of dynamic in the school board as well. Let's move on. A couple more here. Mrs. Olps is saying something is untrue. I don't know if she's commenting on what you said or what some of the other people. Oh wow, we're getting spam in here too. Unbelievable.
Literally spam.
Well, look at. I'm not going to click on these.
Are bad.
No, but I mean, I'm not going to click on that and show it.
Okay.
It's like X-rated spam that has like landed in here. So let's see if I can find
the ratings would be high.
I know. We would turn into a, you know, this would be kind of crazy if somebody clicked on one of those. Let's go to I want to get a fresh voice. It's been a number of the same people that have been commenting here.
That's kind of like some of the Facebook groups.
Yeah. Okay. I want to make sure I get everyone in here. Oh, here's a new person. And this is Daniel Samoya.
Oh, hi, Daniel.
And he says, "Hi, Yuri. Do you support building more leashless dog parks in Poway, or do you consider that new development? And thank you for keeping Walgreens stocked with Icy Hot for our friend Mike."
You know, I met Mr. Samoya, and he developed a picture, and I made his picture, and I saw the name, like, oh, great, I'm finally gonna see Daniel Samoya, because he's quite famous or infamous, depending on your point of view, on Poway under the underground. And he's makes some very funny comments at times.
Yeah, he likes to poke the bear.
Yes, and he came in, and I'm like, "Hello, Mr. Samoya," and he's like, "Hi," and he was very nice. He said, "I'm really not like this in real life. I just like to, you know, have fun on the internet."
Yeah.
And I shook his hand, and he's a nice guy, and you know, he's a little bit too much at times, but he's good for the game.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, it's just funny how social media is like sort of an alternate reality.
Yeah.
But when you meet people face to face,
he was very nice.
They're all good folks.
And as a matter of fact, I had given him his picture, and I didn't realize that he had ordered a picture, I think, like the day before. So I had just given him one that I had made, and then I was getting somebody else's picture, and I saw, oh, he has another picture. So I got on the phone and called him, and hey, you have another picture. I don't want you to think that I purposely held your picture. And he came back like 10, 15 minutes later, and he said, "Thank you." And I'm like, "Hey, take care, man." You know, because I didn't want him to think I was, you know, holding one of his pictures.
Neighbors helping neighbors,
yeah,
right?
But he's a good guy.
Well, let's take his question here about the dog parks.
Oh, can you repeat that one?
So, hi, Yuri. Do you support building more leashless dog parks in Poway, or do you consider that new development?
Well, we have a good dog park that should have leashes on their animals, because unfortunately sometimes a pit bull possibly could attack and injure not only people but a dog. And there was actually a sad case where I forget what type of dog it was, but it was a small dog that unfortunately got attacked by, I think it was a pit bull or a Rottweiler. I'm not 100% sure, or Doberman. I'm not sure, but it was unfortunately injured to the point where it had to be put down, and that was terrible. And I felt sorry for the owner of that animal. So, Daniel, to answer your question, there should never be leashless dog parks. There should always be dog parks where people have their dogs on their leash, or if they're in a confined area where it is separate from other dogs that might be smaller and possibly get injured, then no. But thanks, Daniel. I always know you have the question. I was expecting actually a question from you in regards to like the one you had on Facebook about build more housing, but not Section 8. I think that was you, if I'm not mistaken. It was under the term group participant. So I could be wrong, and if I am, I apologize to you, sir.
That's the anonymous poster,
Yeah.
right?
I don't like anonymous posts. If you can't put your name behind your statement, then don't make the statement.
Yeah, that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there are a lot of other things we could talk about.
Yeah.
I mean, we can get into parks and open spaces. We could talk about the business park and Amazon. We could talk about a lot of other things. But you said that you have some things you want to bring up,
Yes.
so I'm going to let you bring up a topic.
Thank you. I have a 5-point plan, and I have a plan that's better than the one I had 4 years ago. Number one, stop the overdevelopment of our city due to unfair housing mandates from Sacramento. One size doesn't fit all. I believe Sacramento is the main problem that is affecting not just Poway, but every city in California, number one. Number two, expand our senior services programs. On, I believe it was June 21st of this year, I had asked at the council if there could be more senior programs at the Mickey Cafagna Center. And I'm so pleased that they announced this a few weeks back, even before the GVCA, that they are expanding the senior programs. And we can do even more with the seniors. I'm glad that there's more services at the Cafagna Center, but why not? We've all heard the term when there's an only child, like the big brother or big sister program. Well, there's a lot of seniors that, are widows or widowers. And why not have like a program where a young person can be a surrogate grandson or a surrogate granddaughter and visit a senior, once a week or once every 2 weeks for an hour, or call them on the phone and give them a connection with a family. That's one of the things. And more congregate meal programs is something that I'm interested in. And companionship, have them go to either the Mickey Cafagna Center and have like a ballroom dancing or something like that. And senior community, they're not going to like rock and roll necessarily. Have them play music more to their liking from a generation past, like Perry Como or Frank Sinatra,
right?
And give them an opportunity to reminisce about the good old days. That's something that is important to me. We've talked about filling empty vacancies especially on Poway Road. That's one of them. We've talked about my residential district review committee. That's not just about housing. It could be you want an extra stop sign at a busy intersection or something like that. It's not all just about housing and development. Anything, any concern. And then homeless prevention. That's something that I've talked about 4 years ago.
You did. I remember.
In fact, the only two people that talked about the homeless situation 4 years ago was myself and Emily Johnson, who ran for mayor at the time.
Yeah, I remember.
We were the only two people that talked about homeless people, and nobody else. I don't want to say they didn't care, but it wasn't a highest priority.
This is a good topic to discuss because homelessness has gotten worse since 2018.
Oh, yeah.
And we definitely have homeless population in Poway. Some of it's visible, some of it's invisible. I mean, Emily Johnson talked about that, where there are, people that are like essentially living by couch surfing.
Yeah, that technically doesn't count in the survey or census, but yeah, people sleep in their cars. I've seen it in the parking lot of Walmart, buying that gallon of milk at 10:45, and you can see someone sleeping in the car. It happens. And yes, the couch surfing, they don't count that as a homeless crisis. And I have always said that this bothers me. In various times at the council meetings, they said that or a survey of whoever said there's only 5 homeless people in Poway.
5?
That's BS.
Completely. I mean, are they only counting like the ones,
the shopping carts?
The shopping cart people. And even if you only count them, there's way more than 5.
Yeah. And like you said, because of the economic times that we're living in, it's double, triple. Like, I'll even use my job as an example. There have been homeless people that come in and they've stolen items. And of course, for certain things, you can't blame them if it's like a food item because maybe they're hungry. But when they're stealing a beer or, eyeliner, if because it's women homeless too.
Yeah.
It's not just men.
Right.
I've seen it all, and we can't technically do anything. So, and I had an instance a few weeks back that was entertaining to say the least, where a lady came in with a full shopping cart of miscellaneous items, and she would say she had a friend or relative that was with her, and she goes, I'll be in the car, and I'm like, okay. And I didn't pay attention to it at the time, and she'd say, oh, how much is this? Oh, this is $9.99. Oh, I don't want that. And she was expecting me to turn my back so she could run, but my little basket of go backs is literally 6 inches away from me, so I'm just dropping it. And then she's like, oh, I don't want this. I'm like, okay. And then the third item she didn't want, I was like getting annoyed in my head, but I have to be, polite. And then I was like, well, why don't you just tell me what you want to buy instead of what you don't want?
Right.
And she was like this, and she ran off with a bucket full of, I guess, eyeshadow and eyeliner and all that.
Wow.
And I just do the only thing I can do, manager to the front, because we can't do nothing. And, we're not going to, because it's not worth possible getting shot or something like that. But what's wrong is not that they're shoplifting, because shoplifting has gone on forever. What's wrong is there's no recourse, there's no penalty, there's nothing. That's why they're doing it. I remember years ago, if somebody was shoplifting, if they didn't get jumped in the parking lot by the 3 guys that worked there, they were at least going to be detained by a security officer, and the officers would come and they'd get arrested. They'd be out an hour later, but they'd have at least a fine. Now it's like, thank you, steal again. And that's sad. And that's what's wrong with Sacramento again.
Right.
And Governor Newsom again.
Yeah, that's a problem. And we see videos on social media where people have walked into stores, taken what they want, and walked out knowing that there's going to be no one coming after them.
And like, I remember the good shoplifters where they were like
on the down low.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I've had people literally go, don't touch me. I'll sue you. And I'm like, okay.
Well, let's go back to the homelessness in Poway. What do you think? What can you do, or what would you propose to do as mayor to address homelessness in Poway?
Well, I would coordinate something with different organizations like the Alpha Project, for example. Bob McElroy. I don't know if you have heard of him, or I think
his name sounds familiar.
Yeah, he's the president of the Alpha Project. He's a man that I have admired and respected for like 25 years from afar. Now, if I call him tomorrow and go, hi, my name is Yuri Bohlen, I'm a candidate for mayor of Poway, he might be like, okay. But if I'm Yuri Bohlen, mayor of Poway, then something might get done. And I would like to coordinate something with not just the Alpha Project, but other organizations to create not only mental health awareness and counseling and drug and alcohol dependency programs. I want to get them a job afterwards. I want to get them a place to live. I want them to be productive members of society again. They keep talking about the homeless. Now it's an election year. Everybody's talking about the homeless. From top to bottom, every city in California is talking about the homeless because it's the in topic now. After November, half the people won't talk about it anymore because they've already got your vote, and they won't need your vote again for another 4 years. Now, if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, I'm going to talk about the homeless. I'm going to do everything I can in my power to help the homeless, to get them off the streets, rehabilitate them, get them programs, counseling, everything, the whole 9 yards, because the worst thing in this country is indifference. And it's always been, it's a big city problem. And years ago it might have been, but now it's any city problem. And
so what could you do in Poway? Would you just try to educate them and connect them with Alpha Project? Or are there things that you think the city should do?
I think there are things the city can do. Like, for example, there's a facility near not the Goodwill, but the Salvation Army that they have, I'm sure, programs for mental health issues.
Yeah.
And coordinate something with them, with the city, and help people.
Mm-hmm.
And, there are people that don't want your help, obviously. They choose to be homeless. And like property rights, it's individual rights, pursuit of happiness. There's some people that if you said, hey, I want to give you a job tomorrow, I want you to live in this studio apartment and I'll pay the first year's rent for you so you can save up money with the job and then pay me a year from now a reasonable amount, and I'm going to help you get started so that you'll be okay a year from now. There's some people that will take that opportunity and thank you and they will be fine. And then there's some people that are going to walk away from you going, I don't want your help.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of is like individual property rights, so to speak, where you can't control what some people want to do. But the majority, I think, if they were given an opportunity to truly get help, get on their feet, get stability in their lives, I think more often than not, the majority of people would take it.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, most probably would, and then would they follow through? Hopefully some would.
Yeah, some I'm sure would fall off the wagon.
Right. But it just kind of,
it wouldn't be like they were kicked out of a program because they might have slipped up.
Mm-hmm.
You help them again. And yeah, it's common knowledge that people fall off the wagon.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not stop helping them get back on the wagon.
Yeah. And I agree with you completely. We want to help these people out. The question is where does the help come from? Is it through charitable organizations and nonprofits, or is it from city government, or is it dependent upon private individuals to offer the help? But from the city's perspective, what can they do?
Well, they have some funding with the CBGB, I believe it's called.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the homeless program. And then you can always get donations from people that are more well off and want to make a difference in their community as well. You can get with the Alpha Project, the city. I mean, you can have different components for one goal, and that's to try to help people.
Mm-hmm. Let me just kind of switch gears another. We follow each other on social media, and you like my posts, and sometimes I like yours, and because we both are baseball fans, and we have interests that are similar outside of this conversation. But there was one post that you made recently, and it kind of was interesting. And you had reached out to Donald Trump Jr. Seeing if you could get his father to endorse you. Did you get any response to that?
No, and I didn't expect any. It was a political stunt. And, there's an old saying, no news is bad news. Even if they're talking smack, there's no such thing as bad press.
Right.
It was a joke. Now, granted, if former President Donald J. Trump were to endorse me, I would gladly accept, and half of this town would have a coronary.
Yeah, there would be a lot of people.
Donald Trump Jr. has 8.5 million followers on Twitter. It would literally take him 10 years to read every tweet to him.
Yeah.
And by that time, he would read my tweet. I'd either be gone or I'd be retiring after 2 terms. It was a joke. And guess what? Chris Cruz took the bait like a trout in Poway Lake. Okay? She was trying to shame Republicans. For the record, I am a Republican. I believe in bipartisan politics. So it's not like I don't want or care about Democrat voters. I do. We're all Powayians, and I will represent everyone equally and without prejudice. You have my word. And I will also be a full-time mayor to everyone, even those who didn't vote for me and who never will. I will still be your representative, and I will do everything in my power to help you. But back to that statement with the Twitter. She had posted on Twitter, on Facebook, her group, South and North Poway Votes, showing a picture of former President Trump, Mayor Voss, and Rabbi Goldstein after the terrible tragedy at the Chabad. and they were on a mission in Washington, D.C. of tolerance and trying to educate people on different faiths, and that whether you are Jewish, Catholic, Protestant, Muslim, whatever your religion is, we're all human beings. And what happened in April of 2019 was a terrible tragedy, one that I'll never forget.
Yeah.
I saw it on TV, where every channel was Poway in this country. And it was a horrible day. I pray that it never happens, not just in Poway, but anywhere, because we always think that a house of worship is the safest sanctuary on earth. And unfortunately, we live in a world where there is no safe place anymore. And that's a terrible statement to say, but it's the truth. And I cried that day for that lady, Lori Kay.
Mm-hmm.
I even when we have a moment of silence at the council meetings, I say a prayer for her every time, and during that moment of silence. And it bothers me that uh, it was brought up in the way it was brought up on Facebook. It's one thing to criticize me; I can take it, but to use the picture of Mayor Voss, President Trump, and Rabbi Goldstein in a moment of solidarity and humanity and try to just criticize Republicans was wrong. And I didn't appreciate it. And you saw my response to Miss
Mm-hmm.
Cruz.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't ashamed. It was a political stunt. And if it worked, oh, that's what you call the Hail Mary. That's what you call it's a miracle. I never expected an endorsement. 8.5 million followers. It's not like he's ever going to see it. And I responded back saying, you forgot that I'm asking for an endorsement from Larry Elder, Darrell Issa, former President George Bush, and even Arnold Schwarzenegger. But Arnold was unavailable. It was a joke,
Mm-hmm.
but somebody tried to make it into something out of nothing. But I'm glad she did, because it got people talking. It was free publicity. I hadn't put out my flyers yet. Thank you, Chris Cruz.
The drama of Poway, it's something. One of the things that I was mentioning with one of your opponents, it was one of your opponents, I think, or was it one of the council candidates? I interviewed so many, I get them a little bit confused. We talked a little bit about this idea of the old Poway guard, and kind of the institutional support, some of the big money folks that are in town that have largely been supporting a lot of the politicians that are in office today.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true on the school board too, to a degree.
That's true in every state in the union.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah.
And then there is always this kind of a vocal minority that, and I kind of refer to them here, and you have a term, I call them the loyal opposition, and they're always really just fighting the status quo. But it seems that in most every one of these elections, a status quo candidate more often than not wins. Change candidates really struggle in Poway.
True.
Do you think it's going to be different this time?
I hope so. Because I'm one of the change candidates. But time will tell, and the voters will decide.
Yeah, I mean, it's my opinion that Mayor Voss has had a great amount of support in the previous 2 elections, but he's never been more vulnerable than he is in this cycle.
I believe so. And for example, today at work, I had about a dozen people that I don't know. They weren't my regular customers that I know by name in many cases, that are you the gentleman running for mayor? And I go, yes, I am. My name is Yuri Bohlen. Nice to meet you. And they're like, I'm going to vote for you.
Cool.
And I'm like, thank you. And I believe, I didn't get too personal with the people, but I believe they were previous voters for Mayor Voss who are disappointed and want maybe a change.
Well, going back to the failed recall, there were apparently about 5,000 signatures, roughly.
I would like to see evidence.
Yeah. Well, again, let's take them at face value. Let's say there were 5,000 signatures.
If there were 5,000 signatures, why wasn't it shown? One could say, hey, I was only 1,100 short. I gave it the old college try.
Well, I'll repeat what I was told, that they didn't want to violate the privacy of those that did sign, since it wasn't going to turn into a recall in the first place. And they wanted to protect them from retribution. But to the original point is that let's just assume that the numbers are accurate. There are 5,000 people potentially that wanted to remove Mayor Voss. I think that means there's going to be a lot of voters looking at alternative candidates more so in this cycle than maybe they did in the previous cycle.
I agree 100% on that.
So, and it's interesting in your race because there are 4 challengers.
Yes, although I met one of them for the first time, Miss Consol. She came into Walgreens to get some photos developed, I believe, and I didn't know who she was because didn't even think about it. And when I was typing up her name, and she said her name, and I said to her, I go, "Where have you been?" And she was taken aback, and she's like, "I'm sorry," and I'm like, "My name is Yuri Bohlen." She goes, "Oh, you're Yuri Bohlen. Nice to meet you."
Cool.
Yeah, and she was a very nice lady. She, I guess, technically has dropped out, although she's still on the ballot. But I guess she wasn't able to proceed with the election. But she's a very nice lady.
Yeah, well, good for her for at least initially having the bravery, the courage to jump into the race. But it's a tall assignment.
Yeah.
What have you I mean, listen, you've learned a lot, in the city and how the city is operating over the last 4 years, but as a candidate, what have you learned this cycle that maybe you didn't know in 2018 that makes you a better candidate?
I know more about the rules, the regulations, the zoning laws. I know more about property rights because I'm guilty in 2018 of wanting to save everything, but people have rights to sell their property. I didn't know 100% of that. I do now. And like the council has said repeatedly, it's a private property. So why are you blaming us for somebody selling their property? Like the owner of the bowling alley, he said he was waiting for the right price at the right time. And that's pretty much every person who sells a property. They're waiting for the right price at the right time.
Yeah.
And you can't blame them.
No.
It's capitalism. It's freedom.
And that's what homeowners are doing.
Yeah.
For sure.
I learned a lot.
Here's another topic I think it's worthy of discussing is water.
Oh, yes.
Okay. And we had the whole, boil water ordinance and the rope got caught in this
I
infrastructure.
brought one to council meeting once. I brought a $10 piece of rope from Lowe's, and I said a $10 piece of rope is expedited a $70 million bill to the people of Poway. I did.
Oh, that's a good prop.
Yeah. And on November 2nd, when we had of 2021, when we had our Prop 218 water rate increase, there was, I believe, about a dozen speakers, myself included, and we were all upset, obviously, but I was the only public speaker who had an idea of saving the people of Poway money. Instead of having a 4-year 35% water rate increase, which was going to happen no matter how many people were at the council meeting, it's another thing of showing proof of how many voters protested, and it's a legal loophole, and I'll get to that in a second. I was the only one who said, why not defer the 35% water rate increase over 7 years? That way we would only have an annual increase of 5%, and we'd also be covered for 7 years without another Prop 218 water rate increase, because we're going to have one in about 3 years. I guarantee it.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
unless I'm the mayor. Then I'm going to alleviate and defer and not keep going 5%, 10%. No, defer it You defer it even 10 years, so you have 3% annual increases.
But just to, again, devil's advocate, some of the water rates are, they're just passed down by, what is it? Is it metropolitan water, or is it Southern California water?
California, San Diego Water Authority.
Yeah. So in some cases, the cost of water being delivered to the city is going up, and there's nothing you can do.
True. And especially now with
Mm-hmm.
with everything, supply chain demands, inflation, everything.
Well,
so in essence, we're going to suffer for another year or two, no matter who's mayor,
mm-hmm.
for a lot of things.
Do you think, how the argument in the whole water rate thing was, do you have a flat fixed rate, and then the graduated, rate scale is like a softer increase? And some people think the base rate should be as close to zero as possible, and then the graduated rate can be really aggressive. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I'm just glad that our electric bills are still determined on whether the light switch is up or down, because the water tier rate system was flawed. I use an analogy with Little Caesars, at the time, $5 pizzas, which is now, I think, $8 or $9 pizzas. But I had made a comment at a council meeting and even had some chuckles from the council themselves, where I said, if I buy a $5 Little Caesars pizza and my neighbor buys two $5 Little Caesars pizza, why am I paying $8 and he's paying $10? Because the more water you use, in essence, the less you're spending on that water.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first problem right there. You should pay according to how much water you actually use, like how much electricity you use.
Mm-hmm.
The water rate tier was flawed to begin with.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing. I mean, because on one level, those that use excessive amounts of water,
Mm-hmm.
And really don't care what the price is, one would argue that those rates should be really high, particularly if water is a precious resource,
Yeah.
and you want to discourage overuse.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's the other angle to this, is there's, seniors on fixed income, and they can only afford so much. It gets tricky. But what's your take on this whole infrastructure project that's going down?
It's necessary. I mean, you're talking about the clear well?
Yeah, all that.
I was there and I even spoke about that, and I had asked like a tentative schedule for completion, and I was honest and said, nothing's etched in stone, but your general estimate. And I believe they said January of 2025. And I hope that's the case. I personally think it might be past that, just on general history of projects in Poway.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's going to be another 218 water rate increase. It's inevitable. Yeah. And one of the problems that I have with, and it's not Poway's fault or the council's fault, but the Sacramento again, the Prop 218 is so rigged. It's like a blackjack dealer in Las Vegas telling you have to hit on 19 all the time.
Yeah.
It should come in the form, okay, first, nobody's going to PDF their own, download their own PDF, sign it, put a stamp on it, mail it, or even drive to City Hall and say, this is my legal protest. It should come in a ballot form.
Yeah, I agree.
It should be, and you can keep the same rules. If it's not turned in, it's counted as a yes. And if it's not signed, it's counted as a yes. But put it in a ballot form where you circle that bubble saying, no, I don't want this water rate increase. Sign your name and your address and present it to the city clerk. And then you can say, well, we have 20,000 eligible votes and we need 10,001 to stop this water rate increase. And you want to hope that there's 10,001 bubbles filled.
Mm-hmm.
And at least that would be semi-fair.
Yeah, the way they do it is odd. It's like we're going to increase the rate unless enough people say no.
Yeah.
And you've got to be really tuned in to what's going on with city operations to know that this is even being discussed, and then be so proactive to, like you say, download the PDF and fill it out and send it in and everything else. But it is interesting too that it's like a tax increase, where people can vote. But then on the other hand, the rates are going up that are coming down the line, from where we get the water wholesale. So
nobody's
tough.
Nobody's going to win. We're
Right.
all going to pay. And welcome to California.
Okay. Got a few more questions. Okay. So let's see here. Again, this is I think this is a good question here. And this is from Miss Olps. This is a really nice one. What are Yuri's thoughts on Los Penasquitos? I'm assuming this is the
lagoon.
I think it's the pollution that has gone downstream in the creek and has created. I think it's going to cost the city. What is it? Is it $8 million? It's about that. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I remember that story. We didn't know Poway had a lagoon or was connected to a lagoon. That's the same story. There's environmental issues, and it's all starts first with the outpost, with the water. This project as well. There's a lot of problems that need to be addressed. And I will tell you this is not just a Poway issue. This is a Rancho Penasquitos issue as well. And everybody should pay their fair share.
What else? You have a few more things you want to cover? I mean, we're down at like over 2 hours. And again, we have 6 people on the live stream. Thanks for everybody for sticking with us. So this is good. What have we not covered that you think is important that you want to share?
Well, let's talk about Amazon.
Okay, that's a good topic.
Really talk about Amazon creates jobs. Jobs create the economy. Now, I don't know for sure, but I've talked to a few Amazon drivers that used to come into Walgreens to buy their lunch or snacks or whatever. And I asked them, I go, do you live in Poway? And they're like, no, one guy lived in Hemet.
He drove from Hemet to Poway?
Yeah. And then I guess he stayed, sometimes he told me he stayed at one of the hotels because to save money on gas, especially now. And then another gentleman was saying like he lived in Escondido, which isn't far.
Yeah, that's bad.
Reasonable. I wonder, and granted, you can't really control a business on who they hire, but it'd be nice if they hired people that live in Poway, because that would stimulate the economy in Poway for Powayians. I don't know if that's something that can be asked. It certainly can't be forced on anybody, but say, hey, how many of your 1,000 employees live in Poway? And hopefully it's a fair percentage.
Yeah, well, my hunch is that a warehouse worker making, I don't know what they make, let's just say $20 an hour, is probably not living in a $1.5 million home in Poway.
Sure.
And that's probably why the dude lives in Hemet, where housing's a lot more affordable. That's been one of the conundrums, right? Where we've got these businesses, the business park, and there are workers that aren't paid a lot. Some people think, well, we need to have more affordable housing in Poway.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
We should have affordable housing in Poway, and we should have market rate housing in Poway, and we should have single family home use in Poway. We should have every aspect of housing available, but the right amount. And I don't believe it should be 1,618 potential housing units that Sacramento wants to do. Now, I don't want to say, oh, it should be 800 or 600. That's something that if I'm fortunate enough to be elected mayor, I'll sit down with our city manager, Chris Hazeltine. I'll sit down with our lawyer, Alan Fenstenmacher. I'll sit down with our director of development, Bob Manis. And I think the 4 of us will look at our options and say, how many affordable housing units are we supposed to have as far as Sacramento tells us? And we'll go from there, where we might find a more appropriate and fair number, not just with affordable housing, but every aspect of housing. Because the problem, I'm serious, is Sacramento. If Sacramento was reasonable, if Sacramento was fair, we wouldn't be talking for 2.5 hours about development.
Well, one of the arguments that was made about the farm project, specifically the proposition that was voted on, was that if we don't pass it, if we didn't pass the
Oh, yeah,
proposition,
it was a Amazon jungle fire hazard.
well, yeah, it was a fire hazard. But the argument was is that if we didn't pass it and make it, transform the golf course to housing,
Mhm.
that Sacramento was going to come in and mandate that we do certain things. That, and at least if we had the proposition, we would have some local control. Now, what's your take on that?
That's true. There is some local control with the farm. People aren't happy. People are never going to be happy. It's good and bad on all sides. But yes, if they didn't do the farm, if say it got voted down like Stone Ridge did, or Prop P,
Yeah, it was a P. It was P
in 2016, I
Mhm.
believe. Then yeah, Sacramento probably would have found the right developer, and Mr. Schlesinger would have sold it maybe even for more money. And maybe instead of 160 homes, it'd be 450 homes. That's quite possible. So there is that term, the lesser of two evils.
Mhm.
And at least people were allowed to vote on it. And sure, not everybody's going to be happy. That's life. But it could have been 400 homes instead of 160 if Sacramento put its fingers on it.
Yeah. Well, and now they're going to be allowing single family lots to be parsed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just for granny flats, but maybe converting them into 4-unit apartments, right?
Mm-hmm. Now with the granny flat proposal that Mayor Voss had proposed a few years back,
Yeah.
It was a way to try to cover the quota from Sacramento.
Mhm.
And it had some good points, but it also had some bad points. Now, for example, you have a lovely home, you have a lot of area square footage, and you have a nice big yard. If you wanted to have a granny flat in your backyard, maybe you would want your son or your daughter to live there, help pay some expenses, and then give them their privacy as their own home. And that would be fine. That would be your right, and it would benefit you, and it would benefit a future homeowner and your son or daughter. But the proposal with the granny flats was having literally a stranger in your backyard. And I think most people didn't want that. If it was a friend, a relative, or someone that was thoroughly vetted with the real estate agent, where they have good credit, they pay their rent, there's no problems, no drugs, no alcohol, stuff like that, more people would probably have granny flats. But it was, again, Sacramento telling you, put a granny flat, you'll get part of the money from the renter after a certain amount of years, and then you'll get all of the money after, when everything's been like paid for. That was never going to fly. People don't want strangers in their backyard.
Yeah, I think Mayor Voss's proposal, the way that I understood it is that the city would be able to provide some financial assistance. I don't know if it was a loan or a grant to property owners in Poway for the purpose of building the granny flat. And then that granny flat would be made available for as low income housing. So that's your stranger example.
Yeah.
And then the rent money that came from it would go through some kind of a revenue split where some of it would go to the homeowner, the property owner, and some of it would go back to the city of Poway to replenish the money that went. It seemed like it. Now, I was critical of that idea. I'm a big supporter of granny flats and property owners doing what they want on their property. But
wouldn't you want to have who you want on your property?
Well, of course. Yeah. But I think it was a contingency. So if you decided you wanted to jump in bed with the city to get your granny flat finance, then it came with strings attached, which was, making it available for affordable housing. And that was always the tricky thing from my perspective, is the way the city was kind of going outside the scope of what normally a city government does. But at any rate, Mayor Voss's proposal was almost like an idea that was floated. It never really got any traction, did it?
No, not to my knowledge.
Yeah. It was an interesting idea. Now, but to your point, I think Sacramento is having mandates coming down the line.
And why? Is it really about giving people an opportunity to live in a house or own a house? Or is it just stacking the houses, so to speak, where they want more people in here so that they have more control.
Well, I mean, you take it at face value, or you can say that there's something else going on behind the curtain. But at face value, the way that I understand it is that there's a housing crisis in California, that real estate is expensive, rent is expensive, it's unaffordable, it's leading to homelessness, it's causing major financial distress. We're talking about people that were desperate and going into crime, and it's creating a lot of negative impacts on the economy because local businesses can't find people to hire to live near the business. So it seems to me that I think they said in Sacramento that there was a certain deficit. And I've heard nationally there's 10 million homes that need to be built to catch us up. For the state of California, I don't know what the number is, but there's a deficit in housing. And so now they're finally to encourage it.
Who determines that?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, that's part of the problem too. We don't know who's really stating that fact, or is it a?
But you can witness it. Like how hard is it to find a home for sale? The inventory is so low. Finding available apartments, especially at an affordable rate, is like next to impossible.
Yeah.
So
why are we going to build more homes that are going to be hard to be affordable?
Well,
especially like numbers that maybe don't make sense for every city.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point. Is when Sacramento is making mandates, for the city of Poway or the city of Chula Vista. Every one of those cities has their own nuances of what's going on in their world.
That's why I believe every city should determine their own housing needs.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
And I believe that if I'm fortunate enough to be elected mayor and I make a press conference or have city staff email every elected official, put out flyers, press release, whatever you want to say, I bet you I will have a lot of support. And when I do hand that piece of paper to Governor Newsom, it's going to be something. And if anybody can do it, it's me.
Well, I could see you doing that. Marching up the hills of the state or the stairs of the state capitol to deliver it. That'd be a moment.
Yeah.
Gosh, what do we got? We're at like 2 hours and 20 minutes.
It feels like 20 minutes.
Does it go fast? Yeah. But see, this is stuff that you love and you're passionate about it, right? What have we missed? What other big topics? I mean,
I would like to bring up something. And a few weeks back, I guess it was on, I don't know if it was on either Poway Under the Underground or if it was on South and North Poway Votes or one of the other groups about medical marijuana dispensaries.
Oh yeah.
Like, go ahead for those who might not have heard, like your take on that.
Oh yeah. I have my own opinion on that for sure. And the reason that it's kind of topical right now is because they're trying to put one in Rancho Bernardo.
Yes,
that was kind of back where the El Torito used to be, kind of by the McDonald's on Bernardo Center in the 15. And the people in Rancho Bernardo are fighting against it, and they have limited authority to do it
because it's San Diego.
Because it's the city of San Diego, And meanwhile, here in Poway, my understanding is that they're not allowed. Now, I don't know if that's like an actual rule in the city policy, or if that is the five of them on the city council have all mostly vowed they will never have one in Poway.
I believe it's in one of the codes, because I remember reading about that where it stated no medical marijuana dispensaries, and even one that I was against or should amend is no pawn shops is in one of the
well, we already have one.
Not in Poway.
Oh, we used to, and it got blown out with the Fairfield project.
And I knew people that worked at the pawn shop, and they had left the Carriage Center before they even had to, because they saw the writing on the wall.
Oh yeah.
So they're still technically on Poway Road, but it's in Sabre Springs, which is of course San Diego.
Yeah.
But as far as medical marijuana dispensaries, I'm in 100% agreement with Mayor Voss and the council, and I'll tell you why. The original intent of medicinal marijuana was to help treat people with serious, debilitating diseases, cancer, AIDS, Parkinson's, Lou Gehrig's, every disease you can think of for comfort pain. It has been exploited and turned around by legalized drug dealers, smart businessmen who will pay their taxes, but they're no better, no worse than a drug dealer behind the alley, in my opinion. Because the majority of people that are using the medical marijuana dispensaries are just young kids smoking weed in general. I'm sure some are legitimate, but in general, that's what the clientele is. And no amount of tax revenue, in my opinion, is worth corrupting the youth of not only Poway, but America in general, because there are 99.9% good parents, but chances are their teenager, and especially teenage boys, are going to experiment with marijuana, which might lead to harder drugs, which might lead to homelessness. If you go take 10 homeless people, I'm sure at least 9 out of those 10 started with marijuana. My opinion. And then I'll tell you why I'm really passionately against that. I lost a family member many years ago who was under the influence of marijuana, whose ability to reason and think and do something correct was impaired, and he was struck by not one but 2 vehicles while crossing an intersection. If he had been sober, he would have looked both ways, and sadly, marijuana in essence cost him his life. That's my 2 cents, and I have, you're certainly more than entitled to your opinion, and I respect you and your opinion as well. We just differ more vigorously than certain other issues, because I know we probably agree, I'm guessing 35 to maybe 50 if we're lucky on various issues. Maybe even less.
I don't know. It depends on the topic.
But the one thing that I not only admire and respect about you is, even though we might disagree, you've always been fair, respectful, and you've never tried to put anybody down. I've watched every show, especially those that involve Poway, if not the whole entirety, but bits and pieces. And I sometimes can tell when maybe you're 100% in agreement and maybe you're not, but you're always professional, and I appreciate that.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, you and I strongly disagree on the topic of the marijuana dispensaries.
But I'd hold nothing against you.
Well, and neither you, but this podcast is really about your candidacy. It's not about us having a debate.
No, I know. I just wanted to talk about that because I've had people, well, I haven't had personally, but I've seen on Facebook where people talk about, why don't we have a medical marijuana dispensary? And that's one of my opinions, that we shouldn't, because it's going to lead to further problems, in my opinion. And as far as the legitimacy of medicinal marijuana, they can go to an actual real doctor and get the marijuana without the, I don't know if it's the THC or the other element, where it numbs them and gives them comfort without making them want to go eat 10 tacos at 1:45.
Well, we're getting close to 1:45 right now, but let me just say this. I'm not going to debate you on it, because I don't think this is the right forum for it. But this is an interesting thing that I think it's important for the viewers to understand when I'm doing these interviews. I've had multiple candidates here, including you, and in previous election cycles. And there are things that some of the candidates come in here that I strongly disagree with.
But you're respectful.
Right.
Always. And that's what I admire about you.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate that. But
you might, after I leave, tell your wife, oh my God. Yeah. I had to listen to him for 2 hours.
But the point is that this interview that I'm doing with political candidates is I want you to lay it all out.
Yeah.
Okay. I want you to tell everybody what you believe in, what you support, what your campaign platform is. And then I'm just going to be kind of the guy that asks the questions, that kind of gets and kind of milks it out of you. And then we'll let the voters make their judgment.
Perfect.
You know, because if we turn this into like, and I'm not your opponent,
No.
you know, so that's why I'm not debating it. And that's so some of the people that are watching,
wish-
if you were wondering why maybe I'm not punching back or something, that's why I don't in these.
And that's why you'll never have a career in CNN.
That's okay. That's okay. I mean, you know, I could do that. I mean, because I definitely feel passionately about a lot of things, but yeah.
But in all seriousness, I wish, like I want to talk about the GVCA forum.
Yeah, let's go.
I was a little bit disappointed because we didn't have an opening statement.
Really?
Yeah. 4 years ago, you videotaped the one at Painted Rock.
Yeah.
Where you had your opening statement. Hello, my name is Yuri Bohlen. I believe in this. I believe in that. Then you answer like 4 or 5 questions and then a closing statement.
Yeah.
At the last forum at the Mickey Cafagna Center, I found out literally 5 minutes before when the moderator, Mr. Burdett, had given us the ground rules, and he had said that you'll answer like 4 questions and then possibly one from the audience and then a closing statement. And I said, "There's no opening statement?" And he goes, "No." And I was like really disappointed because the whole point of a forum is to say, "Hi, my name is," and then tell your story.
Yeah.
And we didn't have that opportunity. And I thought it was, I don't know if it was due to time constraints or
it must have been, because that's a big miss.
Yeah, that disappointed me.
But it must have been a time issue. And that's the beauty of this conversation, that there are no time issues, and we're at 2.5 hours and we're still going strong. We still have some 5 people on the live stream. And again, I don't know who the 5 are, but I think I know who some of them are, but thank you for sticking with us. And just as an aside, Mr. Burdett, Dr. Mark.
Yes.
Dr. Mark. He's my chiropractor. He's a good guy.
Yeah. I saw him about like, I want to say like 2-3 months ago. He came into Walgreens and I said, "Hello, sir." And he didn't recognize me at first. And I'm like, "My name is Yuri Bohlen. I was at the Painted Rock 4 years ago, the GVCFA." And then he goes, "Oh, hi." And he remembered me. And then I saw him like a couple weeks later and I was like, "I hope you get to do the forum this year." And he said, "Yeah, we'll see." And then sure enough, he was invited back, and I thought he did a great job.
Yeah.
Especially considering he only had 1 microphone.
Oh, they
only had 1 microphone.
Well, I got some spares here.
Yeah. For next election, you better rent them out.
Yeah, we should like bring the candidate forum here into the podcast studio. Wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah.
Here's a couple more comments here. Again, it looks like Delena and Ed are chatting amongst themselves. But Eggs goes on to say water is out of control for Poway. It's coming from a higher source. I think we've kind of covered that. And then he was saying, don't those businesses have a right to make money? I assume we were talking about marijuana dispensaries. And you know, he was being the devil's advocate.
Sure.
So, but anyway,
so do illegal drug dealers, I suppose. But I personally think it draws bad elements in the city, especially like Poway. And
I'm biting my tongue right now.
Oh, no, that's fine.
I'm really biting my tongue.
Like, for example, one of the other things about, like, they talked about the tattoo parlors as well. Now, I don't personally have a problem if a tattoo parlor were to open up, say, in the business section, because a tattoo isn't going to make you, run a red light because you're impaired. A tattoo isn't going to make you want to have worse things in your life. I mean, a tattoo is a
okay. I got to respond. I have to respond.
Sure.
So if you know where the new Amazon Fresh is?
Yes. And has they actually opened the door yet?
Not yet. It's going to open. I think it keeps getting delayed. I think it was supposed to be like August and then September. Now I'm hearing February, but I'm not sure. And then, like in that shopping center, there's the original Pancake House, and there's the Carl's Jr. And you go back in the far corner, there's the Jersey Mike's.
Yeah.
But a couple doors down from Jersey Mike's, there's a liquor store that sells booze that can impair people.
True.
So should they be illegal?
No, we already had prohibition.
Right. Prohibition doesn't work.
But marijuana is a little bit different. It's a little bit different.
Yeah, it's far less damaging. It's a medicine, and it's safer than alcohol.
Well, I tend to disagree on that, because it's more likely to smell alcohol on somebody more than driving under the influence. I mean, you shouldn't drive under the influence of anything, number one. But alcohol's been legal since what, 1921, I believe, something.
I think prohibition ended like in 33. I think
33, maybe.
Yeah, it was made illegal like in 20, I think.
Okay, yeah, that's where I was getting at. But how long has marijuana been legal, roughly?
I mean, technically, it's not even legal nationally. It's still on the Schedule 1 narcotics list.
Yeah.
But in the state of California, for recreational and medical,
it's probably been 10 years now, at least.
Maybe less than that. I mean, it's been more than 10 for medical.
Oh, yeah.
But for recreational, I'm maybe 8.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And it's legal in the state, but it's not legal in Poway.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess that's a whole rabbit hole. I was biting my tongue, but I couldn't resist. Okay. So
basically they just have to go to downtown, buy their stuff, and then come back home to Poway, which is fine.
Or they just get on their computer and place an order and they have it delivered.
Yeah. And that's a better alternative, because at least you won't necessarily know where to get it in general, the average person. And when I say that, I'm talking about young people. Okay. Because they're the ones that don't know when to stop sometimes. They're the ones that are impressionable. They're the ones that might turn a different path because maybe that weed ain't hitting it so good, and they're going to go to something different that's going to give them that better feeling, and that's going to lead to harder and stronger things.
Yeah. Okay. Again, I'm biting my tongue here, but let's move on.
Forward.
Yeah. So again, I want to just go through a couple of comments here, and there are people here kind of commenting on the medical marijuana. I want to make sure people's voices are heard.
Sure.
So, Mariana Benedict Basila says, Yuri, how do you feel about bars having parking lots? It's an interesting one.
Bars having parking lots?
I think that's kind of alluding to people drinking and then getting in their car and driving.
As long as they don't drink over the limit to get them so impaired that they could possibly have a car accident and kill somebody. But I see your point where you're trying to say, yeah, somebody just drank a pitcher of beer and then went home. They might be technically legally drunk, 08 or greater. I understand what you're saying, Miss Basilia. But I think alcohol is a little bit different than marijuana. That's my opinion. And I respect yours as well. And I respect John's as well. And we can agree to disagree. And
well, we've opened up this can of worms, because I'm going to there's a bunch of people had some comments on this. This is kind of lighten up the board here. Tony Russo says, Yuri, so we shouldn't have any bars or entertainment in Poway.
That's not what I'm saying. I don't consider a medicinal marijuana as an entertainment facility. I mean, you of all people, Tony, should know that you owned a great bar once upon a time, and a bar is different from a medical marijuana dispensary, in my opinion. Period.
Okay, I want to tee this up. This is by far the best comment that I'm about to click on of anyone for the whole night. Are you ready? Sure. And it's from Ed Franklin.
Okay.
And it said, you should probably end this podcast. You're both tired. I think he's right.
John might want to, but I mean,
you're going strong, and I'm yeah, we are getting tired. What time is it? It's like 10:45, but I'm okay. I told you. First of all, I want to just say this so that people can listen, is that I want to apologize to you. We were supposed to start at 7. And
playoffs.
I was at the Padre game, and it started at 1:35, and I was thinking, well, I think maybe I can get back by 6, and we have no problem starting at 7. And it was hell getting out of the stadium, getting out of this parking garage and everything else. You were a great sport, and we talked multiple times and
Twitter or
texted, and And thank you for that.
Oh.
And as a result, we started later.
Yeah, no worries.
So because I inconvenienced you, I don't want to like end this.
Sure.
I'm going to let it play out,
Okay.
and we'll kind of get it all the way through.
And you tell me when you're kind of ready, because
okay,
it's your show.
I'll tell you, like, where our live stream audience just increased a little bit more. Ed Franklin, and I'm gonna like let people get their 2 cents in here. Ed Franklin says pot is legal, tattoos are legal.
Yeah, I'm okay.
Go home, get some rest. Yeah, thank you, Ed. That's again the best advice. Delana Olps had a death in her family from a drunk driver. That's sad.
My condolences, sincerely.
Yeah.
To lose a loved one is very terrible, and my sincerest condolences to you, Miss Olps.
I'm gonna toot
but
my
I lost
horn
a close relative indirectly because of marijuana, and I'm sorry for both of us.
Mariana Benedict Basila says, thank you, John, for knowing that info about cannabis. She wrote cannabism. It's like it's cannabis. Says the woman who does smoke. Anyways, yeah. Ed Franklin is again advising us to stay away from this. We're going down a rabbit hole.
Sure.
Okay, so let's get back on track. For Poway, tell me what else is on your platform that we have missed. What else is there that we have not covered?
Well,
why should people vote for you as opposed to voting for Mayor Voss or any of the other 3 challengers?
I believe people should vote for me for the simple fact that they will have a voice under my leadership. The Residential District Review Committee that I am going to have if I'm elected is going to be for everyone, no matter political affiliation, no matter your race, no matter your religion, no matter your age. If you live no matter even if you're a legal resident or a foreign national, even if you can't vote, you still live in Poway, you're a Powayian, in my opinion, and your opinion matters just as much as the next guy. And I want feedback from people. I really do, because if enough people give their feedback, I think more people will be happy, especially if a lot of that feedback is being implemented in city decisions. I firmly believe that.
Yeah, that's a noble idea, because a lot of people feel they're not being heard, right? And so you want to provide that mechanism to listen to the people, so that their ideas, their input, their criticism, their needs, wants, and desires can be heard.
Yes, and I know not everybody's going to be happy, but I think more often than not, people will be satisfied and more pleased with the direction and future of our city.
How can people find more information about you?
Go on Facebook, Yuri Bohlen for Mayor, Poway, and then City and the Country Forever, and then even my regular Facebook page and my phone number. It's in there. You can find it on the Yuri Bohlen for Mayor, Poway. I don't have a website because I didn't need one, and I'll tell you why. A website is basically to ask for donations. I've done everything myself, my own money. I don't want any donations. I didn't accept any. I was offered a few, and I respectfully declined.
So you paid for your own mailing. That's expensive.
Yes, it is.
Wow.
But in life, you have to take risks. You have to gamble. It's well worth it no matter the outcome, because I got to do it like Sinatra, my way.
That's one of the classic songs.
And I literally am by myself. I am the Lone Ranger. I don't have an entourage like some candidates. I don't have coaches like some candidates. I don't have mentors like some candidates. When you see my name on the ballot, that's me. When you see other names on the ballot, it's possibly upwards of 10 to 15 people guiding.
Oh yeah. No, there's no doubt that some candidates have, an organization, varying sizes that are behind them, and then affiliations with other PACs and political parties and other special interest groups that are backing them. That's for sure.
And agendas. Oh, you know what we forgot to talk about? and I think it's because I'm a Republican, it wasn't even brought up. Climate action plan.
Oh yeah, we haven't talked. That's like we asked that of every candidate. Why
Yes.
did we not bring that up? Okay,
All right.
what's your take?
First, what is the definition of a climate action plan? Sincere question.
Mm-hmm.
Is it something similar to that of Governor Newsom and gas vehicles? Will that same approach apply to your gas stove, your water heater? Will you be required to have solar panels on your roof or face possible penalties? All the proponents of a climate action plan never really get into specifics of what it actually entails. And I would love to hear it from someone that is a proponent of that one day. Perhaps one day we will. Now, proponents also state that there's free money on the table from the state and the federal government on various incentives. As we all know in life, nothing is free, least of all if it comes from the government. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
The taxpayers are going to pay the bill, number one. But I will be sincere and I will be fair. If I am elected mayor and a climate action plan comes before my desk, I will sincerely read it and it will be thoroughly vetted to ensure that it doesn't hurt more people than it helps. And if it passes the smell test, it would be strictly on a voluntary basis for those who wish to participate.
Yeah.
Meaning, you want solar panels on your roof and there's a program that helps you pay for it, that's your business. But if the next door neighbor likes his shingles, he's going to keep them. He's not going to be forced on it to do something. And I'll use an example of that green garbage can that a lot of us have that's behind our shed that doesn't really have yard waste because we got rocks or we got wood chips, but we're still being charged for that green garbage can that we don't use. And I fear that the same approach will be with the climate action plan as well.
Well, let me just say that the proposals that I've heard, because I've interviewed other candidates, none of the other candidates are saying that they would mandate that homeowners install solar. So it seems like most of the suggestions are within city government. Can they put solar panels on the city hall? Can they?
If they choose to.
If they choose to. But obviously, if the city created a climate action plan and they agreed as part of that plan to put solar on their rooftop, that would be one potential component.
Sure.
Other components within city operations that were proposed were like LED lighting for the street lights. Could be that some of the city vehicles be electric. And then as far as it pertained to private homeowners and property owners and private businesses, what I've heard from the other candidates, especially the ones that are really hardcore for this, is that they would simply encourage it from the bully pulpit and point them in the direction of state programs where there is money on the table that they may be able to use to partially pay for the installation of say, for example, solar, but that the city would never subsidize it. The city would never mandate it for private business. That's what I've heard.
Yeah. Well, if it ever comes before me, if I'm fortunate enough to even make a decision on that one day, I will thoroughly vet it to ensure that it is voluntary. It passes the smell test. And if people are interested in it, they can participate. You know, over the last 4.5 years, I've talked to God knows how many people, but I'm just going to say a magic number of 500. Not one of those 500 people have ever brought up to me a climate action plan. Like, why don't we have one? Do you support one? I've never been asked that question.
Yeah.
That's why I almost even forgot to even bring it up tonight.
Well, I think, just to name names, as you've mentioned her, Chris Cruz, I mean, she brings it up a lot.
Yeah.
And it is, and Grant, I'm a proponent of a lot of the green technology, but it is interesting that Poway is the only city in the county that doesn't have a plan. Now, granted, on one level, it's a lot of political correctness that's going on, that because everyone's embracing, environmentalism and green technology for a variety of reasons. But it is odd that Poway is the only city that hasn't done that. And according to some of the other candidates, if Poway had a plan, then they would become eligible to get a lot more of this funding to help pay for it within the city.
But you know what happens when the government gives you money?
With strings attached.
They tell you what to do.
Yeah.
So I don't see it as a top priority, but one day in the future, you can look at it. But right now, I don't think it's a top priority of the average Powayian. And like you said, there's strings attached.
Yeah.
Everything is strings attached from Sacramento.
Oh, good. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah.
I can't believe I forgot about it. Are you happy the Padres won?
Oh, very happy. Very happy. I'm just glad it, like you said, it wasn't an 18-inning game.
Yeah.
And that 5th inning was incredible. And when you were texting, when we're like negotiating what time, you know, I said, I just hope it's 3 up and 3 down from the rest of the way, so that we wouldn't lose this opportunity to be together and have a great podcast.
Yeah, it's just a lot of fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So people are voting now.
Yes.
Right? I mean, we're in the home stretch here.
Yeah, it's hard to believe. 20 days. Yeah. 20 days.
And I mean, it's a huge percentage of Poway people vote by mail.
Yes.
So when the polls close, like in the next, like 15 minutes after that, they post all the mail-in votes.
Yeah.
You're going to know right away. It's probably not going to drag out for.
Oh, like the Joel Anderson Voss race.
Wasn't that crazy? That was amazing.
Like opening night, so to speak, election night. I believe Mayor Voss was something like 4,000 up. And I'm like, oh, wow, he's going to be leaving Poway. And I was kind of disappointed because I was waiting for this moment. And then like the next day, it was like, well, Mayor Voss is leading by like 3,500 votes. I'm like, okay, well. The next day, it was like 3,000 and kept going lower and lower.
Well, because the Republicans nowadays vote on
election
day, and the Republican Party endorsed Joel Anderson. So I think that's part of the reason why the gap closed as they counted ballots.
Yeah, it was amazing that every day it went less and less, and then he was overtaken by Mr. Anderson. And the one thing that I still don't understand about recent elections is, why does it take so long to count ballots now? Literally, especially like in San Diego or Poway, why does it take almost 3 weeks to count the final total?
Well, my hunch is that they're, I mean, you can just blast them through a machine like a Scantron when we took a test to fill in the bubbles. But there must be like some hand count verification.
There has to be, but it's like you're waiting for 5 o'clock to go on the Register of Voters website to get the latest update. And then you see that they counted 1,000 ballots and there's still 15,000 outstanding. And so you're waiting like 1,000 a day to see what's going on. I think it should be faster.
Yeah. I agree with you. I am surprised by that. Well, at least it's not like the year 2000 where they were holding the hanging Chad up to the light, and you know, so they don't have to do that anymore. So, hey, I want to thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. It was an honor and a privilege, and I hope I can be here before the next 4 years or 10 years.
Yeah. So, you know,
I went from episode 9 to, is this 292?
292.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So you're always welcome to be here. And you know, it doesn't have to be an election season.
Yeah. And matter of fact, I would love to be a fly on the wall with you and Hacksaw one day.
See, Hacksaw and I this is amazing that I'm doing a podcast with Hacksaw. I mean, I'm like a kid in a candy store. Every Thursday at 3 we do it.
Wow.
Yeah. So we never had like people hanging out watching it, but I'll ask him.
Yeah,
if he'd be up for it.
Yeah, I mean, I can watch it from home, like I will, but you know, I'd love to just be like, "Hello, Mr. Hamilton."
He's amazing.
Yeah,
and it's just, but he's a great guy.
Yeah,
and he lives real close. And we've started the podcast, and we're only through, I think, 14 episodes.
Yeah,
and his numbers are just skyrocketing in terms of subscribers and views and downloads. I mean, it's amazing. So yeah, we're going to do a show tomorrow.
I have a question for you. I don't know if you remember, it was on ESPN in like I want to say like the mid to late 90s. I think it was set. I think the name of the show was like What's on Tap. I don't know if you remember that.
I think that sounds familiar.
It was a setting like kind of like Cheers, the TV show, where it was like 2 or 3 guys with a beer, and it was like a kind of a Jeopardy format, and it was all sports trivia questions.
Oh, that sounds familiar.
Yeah. Just an idea. Maybe one day we can have like you be, of course, the host and the moderator and the one who asks all the questions, and have like some guests here and like play a game show, so to speak, of sports trivia, and that would be fun, and I'd like to participate. And the prize would be something minimal, like a beer or something.
Well, we could do like a Poway trivia show. Wouldn't that be something?
That too.
We just Mary Shepherdson would not be allowed to participate because she would just beat everybody.
She's the Ken Jennings of Poway trivia.
She would be.
Yeah.
But that would be a fun thing to do, maybe.
Yeah.
Just to shake it up. So that's a good idea.
Yeah.
But anyways, again, thanks for hanging with us.
Thank you.
For the people that have stayed with us, there's 5 of us. We're almost at 3 hours.
Wow.
Thanks a ton for all of you that have been watching and listening. And Yuri, good luck in the election.
Thank you. And I just want to say this. No matter what happens in this election, I just want to thank the voters of Poway, whether they voted for me or not, for the simple fact that they care enough about their community and the city that we all love to take the time to vote. Thank you.
Cool. That's a great way to close. Okay, friends. Thanks again. Thanks for watching. Let's all go to sleep. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.